Chapter 1655. Upper Course Tribes. Ling Han decided to first take a different path. Otherwise, negotiations would still take time, so it would be better to take a detour, saving time and effort. But he soon realized that this was not a realistic strategy. When they came to the middle course, there was only a long narrow plain on this side of the river, with tall mountains by the side. At present, the plain had been occupied by the various tribes, so if he wanted to take a different path, he would have to pass through the mountains. However, the mountain path would be too difficult to travel. Not only would he have to circle around a very far distance, it was not peaceful in the mountains, either, as there were peak stage Saint King-level demonic beasts. True, all the tribes lived by the river course so that other tribes would not have the chance to obtain the river water from further up the river course, so how could they possibly allow others to easily travel via a different path? Then they would just have to stick to the same path. Ling Han told Xiao Gu not to imitate the speech of others no matter what. Wasn't imitating their speech in front of saint-level elites an insult to them? Furthermore, this guy was getting more and more fluent in its words recently. It did not even pause in its words now, and was very fast even when it was repeating the words of others. The first middle course tribe they encountered was called the Yu tribe. A great formation rippled. With a great river as its foundations, its power also originating from the river flow, and sharing the same origins as the cultivation system here, it belonged to a completely new formation system. What Ling Han had previously learnt was completely useless here. If he wanted to unravel the formation, he could only barge through with brute force. "All of you, follow behind me," Ling Han said. The strength of this formation should be comparable to an early-stage Saint King's, and was definitely not something that the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others could stand against. In Xiao Gu's case, it would not be convenient for it to make a move. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to negotiate. Not only would they have to battle all the way through, they would also alert all the tribes which would begin hunting them down. Long Xiangyue had long since entered into the spatial god tool. The four of them followed behind Ling Han, with Xiao Gu bringing up the rear. It was powerful enough, so if any unexpected situation happened, it could take care of their group from the rear while Ling Han would be in charge in the front. Ling Han waved a palm, splitting the formation open, and calmly entered. Whether it was a formation or attack, they all had one basic rule, and that was that strength was the most important factor. At present, Ling Han's power was close to a peak stage Saint King's. Thus, he did not have to be concerned which system the formation belonged to, nor did he have to look for any kind of weakness, and only had to break it open with brute force. Suppressed under his frightening power, the power of the formation could not corrode them. It was like the formation itself was a sea, and they had gained the ability to avoid the water, forcibly setting up a safe passageway through the water. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others all clicked their tongues in amazement. The violent power of the formation was roaring 2 or 3 feet away from them, yet could not approach them in the slightest. "Humph, who dares barge into our Yu tribe?" A cold voice rang out, sounding out in everyone's minds through divine sense. Ling Han smiled slightly. "Friend, we only want to pass by. Please accommodate us." "Outsiders." This voice paused slightly, seeming to be considering. After a while it finally exclaimed, "You all have to travel by the river course and cannot veer off the path. If you enter into our tribe, then don't blame us for being rude." This meant that he was going to let them pass. Ling Han nodded. This was not because that man was easy to deal with, but rather the strength that he showed was powerful enough, so the former agreed to have them pass through to prevent any accidents from happening for no reason. If it had been the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others asking for passage outside the formation, this man would have ignored them. Only with enough strength did one's words have adequate weight. Otherwise, it would only be shouting that would serve no purpose. Ling Han naturally did not point that out. This kind of matter needed a tacit mutual understanding. He strode over, and suddenly discovered that the might of the formation had weakened considerably. Clearly, that person from the Yu tribe had deliberately controlled the formation, showing them benevolence. "Many thanks, friend," Ling Han said with a smile. The person did not speak, and remained silent. In only about 15 minutes' time, they had already exited the formation. A boundless plain appeared in front of them. This area actually still belonged to the territory of the Yu tribe, but the formation would ordinarily be used to guard against the tribes from the lower course, so there was no protective formation set up here. When they headed further up, and exited the territory of the Yu tribe, they would see the formation that had been laid out by the next tribe, which was used to guard against the Yu tribe. Ling Han stopped and smilingly said to Xiao Gu, "Xiao Gu has performed well this time."
"Humph, who dares barge into our Yu tribe?"
"Friend, I only want to." Ling Han had just spoken up when Xiao Gu immediately imitated his speech impatiently, repeating the words of Ling Han and that member from the Yu tribe again, involuntarily causing the four of them to erupt in laughter. Apparently, Xiao Gu had controlled itself with much difficulty previously, and thus was impatiently imitating speech again. After Xiao Gu had finished repeating their words, it looked blankly at the four of them.
"Why are you laughing?"
It slanted its head to one side.
"Yeah.
It then began laughing dumbly as well. After a day of travel, another formation appeared in front of them. The five of them still barged through forcefully. That was the territory of the Tong tribe. Thankfully, the elite that was in charge of the formation had no desire to start a battle, and after Ling Han said a few polite words, he allowed them to pass through, but he was not as benevolent as that person from the Yu tribe. He did not weaken the might of the formation, and only acted as if he did not see the five of them. Their luck was not too bad. They only had to politely say a few words, and they would be allowed to pass. However, when they entered the upper course area, they encountered trouble at the first passing.
Scram!
When they entered into the formation, they immediately heard a sharp rebuke ring out. Ling Han frowned. From the very beginning, this was their attitude. It looked like it would be slightly difficult for them to ask for passage. The upper course tribes were too overbearing.
"Friend, we are only asking to pass through," he stated calmly. "I told you all to scram, did you not hear me?"
The person's tone was very provoking.
"Ho ho, I do not know how to scram, so forgive me for not obeying."
Ling Han strode over, his anger also spiking.
"Insolence!"
The person sneered.
Boom! A burst of great power suddenly came from the formation.
A pitch-black wild beast suddenly appeared, and pounced to attack Ling Han and the others. This wild beast looked like a giant lion, but it had a pair of horns on its head and as many as 9 tails. It clearly had been produced from that person actively channeling the formation, starting an offensive towards Ling Han and the others. Ling Han flicked out a finger. Wang, sword chi surged out, dazzling the skies, and splitting this fierce beast in two. However, it had been formed from the Great Formation, so even if it was cut in half, it would not die. Instead, it would absorb the power of the formation, and when it was split, it would become 2 fierce beasts. Haha, this is the 10,000 manifestations Great Formation. The more you all resist, the greater the power will be provoked from the formation. You are all merely seeking death. The person laughed. Despicable outsiders, all of you will die. From his tone, it seemed that he was filled with fury towards outsiders. Perhaps he had suffered at the hands of outsiders previously, and was thus venting his hatred on Ling Han and his group. Ling Han spread out his divine sense. Though the power of the formation was very strong, and would cause damage to one's spirit, his present divine sense was incredibly resilient, so he was not afraid at all. He forcibly spread out his divine sense within the formation. This was not an illusion formation, so Ling Han soon located the person who was controlling it, a large man wearing a feathered crown on his head and whose upper body was bare. Because he was presently channeling the formation with his full effort, the black rings on him had also appeared. 9 rings, and the 9th ring was clearly not dark enough. His cultivation level probably should be equivalent to middle stage Great Saint tier. Humph, you actually dare release your divine sense towards here. Are you dissatisfied that you are not dying fast enough? The large man also discovered Ling Han was spying on him. He immediately clenched his fist, and shot out a punch at Ling Han's divine sense. Ling Han immediately withdrew his divine sense, and menacingly declared, "I am coming to find you now." Chapter 1656. Breaking the Formation. Ling Han turned around, and headed in the direction of the large man. His speed was astonishingly swift, and even the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the others had slight difficulty following him. They saw him throwing out punches repeatedly, destroying each of the fierce beasts that attacked them with a single punch. The consequence that this led to was indeed the ever-increasing number of the fierce beasts as they consistently pounced on them. Every fierce beast that the formation gave rise to had the battle prowess of an early-stage Saint King.
It was still fine if there were only a few, but after the number had reached a few hundred, the battle prowess definitely could be compared to that of a peak stage Saint King, and even Ling Han would have to expend slightly more effort.
More importantly, the number of the fierce beasts was continuously increasing.
The large man that was controlling the formation smirked coldly.
How can you possibly reach me if you barge around forcefully like that?
It would not even be a third of the way here, and you would be surrounded by the fierce beasts, like a tiger that would be torn apart by a pack of wolves.
However, Ling Han's strength had far surpassed the large man's expectations.
Only when he had traveled 4/5 of the way was Ling Han surrounded by an ocean of fierce beasts, and was not able to take another step further.
Ha ha ha, I really have never seen someone as stupid as you. The large man scoffed in derisive laughter. This formation was unique. There was no future in breaking the formation by force, and the best strategy would be to actively weaken one's cultivation level, and merely stay on the defense, making no move to attack to prevent more formation beasts from appearing. Only then would one have the chance to walk out of the great formation.
But in that way, the man guarding the formation would only have to unleash a fierce offensive, and he would be able to fluster the person who had entered the formation completely.
So there was a choice. Would you release your full strength, or not? Ling Han paid him no regard.
He merely shot out punches continuously, destroying each and every fierce beast, and causing the formation to give rise to even more.
The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others were all confused by his actions. Aren't you simply asking for trouble like this? Ling Han only rained down blows. By now, the number of fierce beasts was more than 100,000. Though it was impossible that they would all attack at the same time, when several hundred or several thousand attacked simultaneously, this was still enough to make a peak stage Saint King sweat. But when Ling Han destroyed another fierce beast, the fierce beast that had been turned into over 100 pieces still wanted to form their respective bodies again. Yet it only turned into multiple masses of black chi that was continuously struggling. They did not immediately form over 100 new fierce beasts like how they had before. Not only that, even the over 100,000 fierce beasts that had already formed did not attack again. Instead, it was like they had become drunk, and were stumbling and shaky in their steps. What was going on here? The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others all looked at Ling Han with surprise. Ling Han stopped and said, "Whether it is a formation or a human being, there is always an upper limit. No matter how strong your potential is, when you are forced to the end of the line, you will immediately crumble. A formation is the same. When it is forced to its limits, it would automatically collapse." And as if they were an explanatory note for his words, thunderous booms were heard when he had just finished his words. The great formation had collapsed on its own, and those fierce beasts had all exploded one after another. Though Ling Han did not know this formation of a different system, he could be considered a grandmaster in terms of formations, and all formations had one common characteristic, and that was that they all had upper limits. Once you broke this upper limit, the formation would naturally be broken. Boom, the great formation collapsed.
In the distance, the large man whose upper body was bare was revealed to their eyes.
He looked completely dumbfounded.
Though he had heard Ling Han's explanation, he did not feel that his doubts had been answered at all.
Instead, he looked like he had seen a ghost. Are you a freak? It sounded simple, but to be able to force a formation to its upper limit, one would first have to be able to sustain the power of the great formation before that limit was reached. Even the tribe's several elders were unable to accomplish that. Even the tribal chief could not. This young outsider actually had battle prowess on the level of the tribal chief. This was too terrifying. Ling Han stretched out a hand and grabbed that man over, and asked, "Have you been bitten by a dog or something? Why do you hate outsiders so much?"
The reason why he had such a guess was because the large black dog and the others had all entered here, and with how despicable that dog was, it would not be a strange thing for this large man to suffer a bit. Just after he said this, he saw that the large man actually flushed bright red, seeming to feel both humiliated and furious.
This. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. His guess had actually been on the mark.
"Don't laugh!" the large man roared loudly, and tried to kill Ling Han as if he had put his life on the line.
Yet he only had the battle prowess on the level of a great saint, so how could he possibly be a match for Ling Han? Ling Han casually pressed down a hand.
"Pa!" That man was instantly pressed onto the ground. His limbs stretched out, forming the Chinese character. Release me or all of you will be dead. The large man was very arrogant because this was the territory of the Zhao tribe. In their own territory, whom did he have to fear? There were a total of 27 9-ring peak stage elites, and any one of them would be able to match this young outsider. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Even a captured prisoner dares to be so arrogant. Looks like you haven't had enough suffering yet. Whatever I ask you just have to answer. Otherwise, ho, just pray for luck then." "You dare!" the large man shouted. The great formation had already collapsed, so there would definitely be people coming from the tribe immediately. What did he have to fear? Ling Han smiled calmly and said to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and Long Yushan, "The two of you, turn your heads around." The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden immediately did as he said, while Long Yushan curiously asked, "Why?" "Pa!" Ling Han flicked out a finger, and the clothing on the large man immediately burst to pieces. In the beginning, his upper body was already bare, and now he had become completely naked. Long Yushan hurriedly turned her head around, but her pretty face was incredibly red with embarrassment. She really wanted to pinch Ling Han severely a few times. What are you doing?" The large man's face had already turned livid. He was a great 9-ring elite, yet his clothes had actually been destroyed by another, showing something that was not appropriate to be seen. He was too embarrassed. "So small," Ling Han evaluated. "So small," Xiaogu repeated. The large man was about to pass out. Being naked in public was bad enough, and they were still assessing his D**CK? Furthermore, you guys had gone too far. You were even parroting each other's words. This was no way to insult another person. This was practically even crueler than that despicable dog. Ling Han smiled slightly. "Are you willing to answer questions now? Ho, otherwise it would not be an evaluation that is coming after. I will hang you up and send you back to your tribe so everyone can observe your precious sword." "No!" the large man exclaimed in a trembling voice. If that happened, how would he still have the face to see other people in the future? "Then just honestly answer the questions," Ling Han stated calmly. "How many groups of outsiders have you encountered here in total?" The large black dog had also been among them, and they, just like Ling Han's group, had had a smooth journey in the beginning, but had been stopped when they had come here. The large black dog had even clashed with this man. It had quietly hidden inside the formation, and bitten off a chunk of flesh from this guy's bottom. Afterwards, through some negotiations, the Empress and the others were allowed to pass, and that large man also nurtured an extreme hatred for all outsiders. Now Ling Han and his group had encountered him, so they naturally would suffer from him deliberately making things difficult for them. But the end result was that he experienced the second great loss that he had ever had in his lifetime. "Outsiders, you have gone too far." At this time, the elites of the Zhao tribe had also rushed here, and they all glared at Ling Han and his group with menacing eyes. Chapter 1657. Ransom. The Zhao tribe mobilized a total of 6 elites. This clearly was not their full strength. They probably thought that this would be enough to suppress Ling Han and his group. Ling Han was internally displeased. His eyes swept over them and he declared, "You guys had better not trifle with me, or he won't be the only person lying here." "How dare you?" the 6 of them rebuked at the same time. Though they were not elders, every single one of them could be called a 9 rings elite, being comparable to the early stage or even middle stage of Saint King tier. "Capture him." The 6 of them moved, and attacked Ling Han in unison. Ling Han casually grabbed the large man from before, holding his ankle. Using him like a weapon, he smashed him into the 6 elites. He brandished the human staff in a powerfully imposing manner. The large man's expression had turned green from fear. He hurriedly channeled his strength throughout his body. Otherwise, if he was hit or struck by his clansmen, he would definitely be crushed into a bloody mush. And those 6 had no choice but to leap aside and dodge to avoid wounding their clansmen by accident. "Fighting with a hostage in hand, what kind of man are you?" they provoked. "None of your business." Ling Han gave a battle cry, and charged towards the 6 of them with his powerful weapon, wielding the large man like he was holding a sword. Wang, he actually did manage to channel sword chi through him, and it was continuously surging out of the large man's body. This caused the large man to suffer. Even if he focused all his power on defense,
How could he possibly bear Ling Han's sword intent? Lacerations immediately formed in his flesh, and he was badly mutilated. Ling Han was fired up from the fight, and casually tossed the large man to one side. Then, he charged into the group of 6. Pang pang pang. Throwing out punches and kicks, he soon suppressed the 6 of them. With his extreme speed, there was no one that could manage to escape. Xiaogu watched from the sidelines, its head slanted to one side. At present, it was like a sponge, continuously absorbing everything around it, and in its heart, Ling Han clearly had the greatest influence on it, so every move and gesture it had was a copy of Ling Han's. Ling Han stood, his hands crossed behind his back. Since things had reached this point, he did not want to easily stop either. After a while, more elites came from the Zhao tribe. There were even more this time round, and had reached 100. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. There really were a lot of elites here. These 100 people were all 9 rings elites, and there were even over a dozen of them whose 9 rings were all black as ink. They had reached the level of peak stage Saint King. Seeing so many fated enemies, Xiaogu's eyes had already turned green. Thankfully, it still remembered Ling Han's words. It lowered its head, and did not make any move, nor did it allow others to discover its unusual state. Its intelligence was gradually increasing, also becoming more human-like. "Release the hostages." An old man who wore a feathered crown that was 15 meters tall spoke up. Hi's feathered crown was the longest. Clearly, he was the chief of the Zhao tribe. His face was ice-cold, his eyes burning with flames of rage that blazed like lightning. Ling Han shook his head and answered, "Old man, I do not like your commanding tone. Change your attitude before you speak again. You're courting death." An elder moved. Hong, as a giant hand stretched out, multiple black veined patterns appeared, and the sun, moon, and stars could vaguely be seen, but it was a completely different cultivation technique from the ancient realm. Ling Han shot out his own punch, striving against the incoming attack, and not backing down the slightest bit. Boom! After the clash, that elder's figure wavered, and he revealed a sliver of surprise in his expression. In his eyes, Ling Han's aura was considerably weaker than his own. Previously, he had exchanged blows with outsiders, so even though they did not belong to the same system of cultivation, it helped him to make a judgment of Ling Han's strength. But this exchange of blows was far beyond his expectations. The other party was actually not the slightest bit weaker than himself. Ahem! The chief of the Zhao tribe opened his mouth. He stretched out a hand and made a pressing gesture with it, signaling that elder not to make any further moves. He said, "Outsider, if you want to ask for passage, we will allow you to pass. Release the hostages immediately, and make your apologies to us, in accompaniment with some gifts to show your apology." "Chief!" all the elders exclaimed in shock. Wasn't this letting them off too lightly? The Zhao tribe's chief shook his head slightly, and softly said, "Focus on the greater picture." Recently, they were mulling over starting a war with the Lang tribe, and they naturally could not allow any unexpected events to take place at this point in time. After all, Ling Han had already proven that his strength could not be underestimated. All the elders were extremely angry, but did not voice out any more objection. They all secretly decided that when Ling Han and his group returned, they would definitely teach them a lesson. He wanted to explore the secret of the source of the upper course? He had to be delusional. All the ancestors of the various tribes had long since worked together to explore that place, but they were not allowed to approach at all. Forcefully barging in would only lead to death, and the final result for Ling Han and his group of outsiders would only be to come back the same way they had come. They all looked at Ling Han. These people were really let off too lightly. They would be allowed to live a few more days. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Please do not misunderstand, I have not come to ask for passage. These 7 people are presently all hostages, so name your offer. If I am satisfied with the price, I will return them to you. Otherwise, they will be killed on the spot. Freshness guaranteed." "You actually dare to blackmail us?" All the elites of the Zhao tribe were furious, and even the chief of the Zhao tribe had a dark expression as he revealed a menacing killing intent. His previous compromise had not been because he was afraid of Ling Han, but rather because he had not wanted to affect the planned attack against the Lang tribe. Was he seeking death? "Take him down," the Zhao tribe chief commanded coldly,
having finally lost all his patience.
Sixth, let's attack together. An elder walked out.
He was the seventh elder of the Xiao tribe, and was brothers with the sixth elder. The two of them working together also had the best coordination.
All right. The sixth elder also walked out.
The two of them stood side by side, staring at Ling Han with eyes filled with ice, their faces expressionless, as if Ling Han was already a dead man.
Ling Han smiled slightly, and used the immovable deity metal body mystical power. 6 arms stretched out at the same time, grabbing the 6 hostages on the ground, wielding them like weapons.
Come on then.
This. You are too shameless, actually using the hostages as weapons. Furthermore, it is already bad enough that you grabbed 2 of them, but you actually grabbed 6 of them. If it wasn't because you only have 6 arms, would you also be grabbing that last hostage? This thought also streaked through Ling Han's mind.
He couldn't help but think, since he could form 4 additional arms, then could he advance a step further, and have this number reach as many as 6, 8, or even more?
He could give it a try.
Perhaps he would have to spend endless time on it, but it was worth the attempt, wasn't it? The 6th elder and 7th elder did not move for fear of harming the hostages, and did not dare to make any moves at all.
They only stood there, looking at Ling Han dumbly. He had never seen such a shameless person. Ling Han said, "If we're not fighting, then let's discuss the ransom. If it's too low, then don't blame me for killing the hostages."
Some had only been defeated, and retreated further down the river course, but there were some that had directly been wiped out, and disappeared in the passage of history.
100 top-grade godly medicines,
the Xiao tribe chief said, and he threw a large pile of godly medicines with a wave of his right hand in front of him. Because there was an extremely large amount of them, one could visibly see the clear interweaving of divine light among them.
Yet Ling Han scoffed and said, "Do you think I am a beggar? You just plan to dismiss me with such paltry things? These godly medicines were only level 16 at most." He suddenly moved, and tore off the arm of a hostage, which he tossed at the elites of the Xiao tribe. Chapter 1658. Exchange. For elites, regrowing a severed arm was not a big deal, but Ling Han doing such a thing was to tell them that he had no scruples.
He dared to tear off his arm now, and he would dare twist off his head next.
"What do you want?" the Xiao tribe chief asked coldly, and they could clearly feel that he had seriously been angered by now. Once they managed to retrieve the hostages, he would kill Ling Han. The war with the Lang tribe could be set aside first. The Xiao tribe had never been bullied like this by anyone before. If their anger could not be vented, then there would be no need for their survival any longer. The other elders also had the same thoughts. You can be as arrogant as you like now, but you will definitely be crying later. Ling Han thought for a moment and then answered, 10 saintly medicines. Impossible. The Xiao tribe chief immediately shook his head. He had to be joking. Did he think that saintly medicines were as common as cabbages in the field? Even if there were abundant resources here, saintly medicines were still incredibly precious. Ling Han compromised and said, 7. 1 in exchange for each person. You guys won't say that a saint is not even worth a saintly medicine? The elites of the Xiao tribe all knew that saints meant 9 rings elites. They naturally would not say no. In truth, even with the help of the Great River, becoming a Ning Rings elite was still very, very difficult, and the chances of success would be considerably increased with the help of saintly medicine. At most 1, the Xiao tribe chief declared resolutely. There were only a total of 3 saintly medicines in the tribe, and they were only medium saint tier. Ling Han looked at his expression, and knew that this was already his limit. Furthermore, if it was not because he was planning to snatch back the saintly medicine after he rescued the hostages, he would not be willing to even make such a compromise. He smiled and said, 1 saintly medicine is too little. Throw another 6 saintly materials into the bargain. Fuck. The elites of the Xiao tribe were all furious. You really aren't reserved at all, huh? You think saintly medicine and saintly material are things that can be found anywhere? The Xiao tribe chief paused for a while, yet still nodded and answered, Fine. He was unwilling to hand out more saintly medicines because he worried that Ling Han would consume it. Then, even if they killed Ling Han and split open his stomach, they would not be able to retrieve the saintly medicine. The loss would be too massive, but saintly material was different. Would he be able to consume it?
Putting aside the question of consuming it, even if it was thrown onto the ground, it would be undamaged.
In that case, so what if they gave it to him? They would be giving in this moment, and getting it back in the next. All the elders also immediately thought of this, and made no further objections.
Let's exchange then.
The Zhao tribe chief drew out a saintly medicine and 6 pieces of saintly material, which he tied together with his spiritual power, and pushed towards Ling Han. Ling Han also used his origin power to tie up the 7 hostages, whom he then pushed towards the side of the Zhao tribe chief. The 2 sides let go at the same time. Ling Han immediately drew the saintly medicine and saintly material into the Black Tower.
With the help of another saintly medicine, he would be able to shrink the time needed to advance into the Great Saint Tier by a considerable few times.
Once he had advanced into the Great Saint Tier, who would be a match for him in the entire ancient realm? Move! The Zhao tribe chief was the first to pounce, launching an offensive at Ling Han. As his spiritual power was channeled, multiple black patterns appeared on his whole body. They were completely incompatible with the ancient realm.
It could be imagined that if he ever left this place, he would definitely be targeted by the heaven and earth. Even the people of the Netherworld would have their Netherworld regulations erased if they ever went to the immortal realm, what more when this was a completely different cultivation system. Perhaps this was also why none of the natives had ever left even when the mystery realm had clearly been opened for quite a few years. If they left this place, even 9 Rings elites could possibly be unable to sustain even a single blow, because it was possible that even their power would be erased.
Yaya! Xiao Gu released a furious roar. It had already held back for a very long time, but now that so many elites had revealed an aura that it despised, they had finally pushed its self-restraint to its limits. Wang, it released a green light, which became an attack that shot towards the Zhao tribe chief. Green light! Destroyer! When the elites of the Zhao tribe saw this, they immediately gasped in shock. Recently, there had been rumors that the legendary destroyer had appeared. They had thought nothing of it, and thought that it was only complete nonsense that had been passed down from the ancient times, but now? The myth had become reality. Charge! Their killing intent immediately blazed. According to the legends, the person that could use green light would bring devastating disaster to all the tribes. All of you step aside, Ling Han said to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others so that they would not be captured by the Zhao tribe and used to threaten him. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others all stepped back. They were all saints, so if they were well prepared, they could break into a run and open the path at any time. Then, aside from Ling Han, who had cultivated extreme speed, there was no other existence that could be a threat to them. Ling Han and Xiao Gu joined forces, battling the elites of the Zhao tribe fiercely. This time, the number of elites from the Zhao tribe had far exceeded the Yuan tribes. There were more than 20 elites with peak stage Saint King level battle prowess, and added with the power boost, their battle prowess was even more frightening. Even such big shots like the Blue Feather Saint King would pale in shock, and could only turn and flee. But compared with the battle with the Yuan tribe, Ling Han had already become considerably stronger, advancing from the peak of the middle stage of medium Saint Tier to the peak stage of medium Saint Tier, while his battle prowess had reached peak stage Saint King, and added with the killing formations, he too was far stronger than any ordinary peak stage Saint King. Xiao Gu was already exerting its full effort. It had drawn out its true form, a crystalline white bone which was exuding a green light, and had terrifying destructive power. But even when Ling Han used all his techniques, the two of them were still at a disadvantage. There were really too many elites from the opposing side, which had reached the extent of a qualitative change, and there were even more elites joining the battle, while the Great Formation was also being recovered. The circumstances were becoming more and more unfavorable for Ling Han and his group. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head, and he immediately leaped back. Using lightning flash, there was no one that was capable of stopping him at all. He stretched out a hand and pressed down on the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others. Don't resist. These words were spoken to Long Yushan. Xiao. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the Notionless Saint were immediately drawn into the Black Tower, but Long Yushan was not. She was a saint, so she instinctively would have resistance towards others' will. Ling Han did not bother to waste his breath. He directly moved to knock her out, then destroyed her spatial god tool, and released Long Xiangyue. Without waiting for the latter to speak, he did the same to her that he did to her aunt, and drew both women into the Black Tower. If Long Xiangyue knew, she would definitely be very depressed because no matter what Ling Han did to her, how could she possibly resist? Ling Han charged back and exclaimed, "Xiao Gu, don't resist!" He wanted to take Xiao Gu into the Black Tower as well, but he could not, because he was unable to wrap Xiao Gu in his divine sense. It was as if the other's whole body was covered with sharp spikes. The slightest touch, and he would be covered all over with wounds. Xiao Gu looked at him blankly. What was the meaning of "don't resist"? It could not understand these words. Ling Han frowned and declared, "Let's go." Xiao Gu could understand these words, and it immediately ran off with Ling Han. It might be cute, but it was not dumb at all. It could still understand the difference between strength and weakness. If they were outmatched, it was natural that they would have to run. In future, they could still come back to redeem their pride. Ling Han grabbed Xiao Gu, and rapidly broke through the siege using lightning flash and fled. Even if there were more than 100 saint-level elites surrounding them, it was useless. In front of his extreme speed, numbers had completely lost their meaning. Ah! Behind them, the furious shouts of the elites of the Zhao tribe rang out. Even in such a situation, they still managed to flee. Ling Han smirked internally. This time, it was him fleeing, but when he had digested that saintly medicine and advanced into the great saint tier, he would make a powerful comeback. By that time, you bastards just wait to be pummeled. Chapter 1659. Return of Great Saint. After throwing off their pursuers, Ling Han had Xiao Gu wait by one side, whilst he entered into the Black Tower. Ling Han, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden and the notionless saint approached him. Ling Han nodded and said, "I am going into seclusion for a period of time." He came to the reincarnation tree, and took out and consumed that saintly medicine without hesitation. Wang, the great Tao, suddenly seemed to resonate with him, and he experienced a period of consistent enlightenment. Godly medicine was a very strange existence.
By itself, it basically did not have much battle prowess, and occasionally some were able to release powerful poison, or affect something like space to protect themselves, but even for saintly medicine, none had ever been able to lay claim to the title of elite. Of course, godly medicine had gained awareness, and would also gain intelligence. When they had stepped on the path of cultivation, that was a different matter. The benefit of godly medicines was that they were birthed by the heaven and earth, and contained the shards of regulations of great Tao, which would help cultivators comprehend Tao. Of course, increasing the accumulation of origin power was also one aspect of it, but it was far less important than the boost to comprehension of cultivation level. The largest effect of saintly medicine was comprehending Tao, and now Ling Han's cultivation level had reached the peak stage of the medium saint tier. He had been cultivating all these days in a place that was abundant with spiritual qi, so he had also gained enough accumulation. Once the doors to comprehension opened, he would be able to break through to the next tier. Underneath the reincarnation tree, as Ling Han refined the medicinal effects, Great Tao turned into a long river that appeared in his mind. Ling Han continuously comprehended, and spiritual techniques appeared repeatedly, allowing him to float in the long river of Great Tao. His accumulation of cultivation level was getting denser and denser, and when 10 days had passed in the outsider world, Ling Han suddenly exited the Black Tower. In truth, he had already comprehended Tao for 1,000 years. With the help of the saintly medicine, he had gained enough appreciation.
Wang, thunderclouds rolled over, lightning dancing amidst them. That scene was enough to make anyone's hair stand on ends. Ling Han's small saint tier tribulation was comparable to great saint tier tribulation, and medium saint tier tribulation was comparable to saint king tier tribulation, and now the heaven and earth of the immortal realm had its upper limits, so it was impossible for the might of the heavenly tribulation to increase without end. At most, it could only reach peak stage saint king tier. But if quality could not be improved, then quantity would be increased. Quang, quang, quang. 10 bolts of lightning descended at the same time, becoming 10 giants. Patterns of great Tao were entwined around each giant, and they charged towards Ling Han. Some were wielding lightning spears, while some were brandishing lightning swords, and they launched an unhesitating offensive towards Ling Han. Ling Han was unafraid. He guided the lightning into his body to temper his godly bones. He had a feeling that if he was in the immortal realm, this would be the last improvement for his godly bones. If he underwent the Saint King tier tribulation here,
then the might of the heavenly tribulation would be completely inadequate to push his physique to the next level. It had to be the might of the heavenly tribulation of the celestial realm.
Yeah. Xiao Gu had been seated by the sidelines all this while. Since Ling Han told it to wait, then it would wait obediently.
When it saw the heavenly tribulation appear, it did not have the fear that others would feel, but rather rushed forwards excitedly, seeming to be quite intrigued. However, as long as it did not disturb the heavenly tribulation would ignore it as well, which made it very depressed.
Why were these lightning giants unwilling to play around with it? Xiao Gu, step out, Ling Han said.
He guided the power of lightning, and the godly bones in his body were currently advancing towards the high level of level 20 godly metal.
Once he succeeded, his physique would be the sturdiest existence in the immortal realm. He would not need to fear even if there were a group of peak stage Saint Kings attacking him simultaneously. If anyone wanted to wound him, they could only slowly refine him using the power of regulation. Xiao Gu gave a yaya, and left the vicinity of the heavenly tribulation. Ling Han approached the heavenly tribulation. His godly bones were already close to level 20 previously, and after only a while of tempering, a qualitative change took place. Level 20.
However, Ling Han did not stop, but rather continued to absorb the power of the heavenly tribulation, causing his godly bones to become even harder, and advancing towards the level of pseudo-divine metal. The so-called pseudo-divine metal was slowly built up from the base of level 20 godly metal so that it would improve further in quality, using the number of layers to categorize its quality. Building up another 2 layers would be 1-star pseudo-divine metal, and going by that calculation, 10-star pseudo-divine metal would be layering 11 pieces of level 20 godly metal as a single layer. This was not just simple layering, but rather merging them from the essence, where each contained the other. Furthermore, it had to be the melding of different godly metals. The same type of godly metal could not possibly be melded together. After 6 hours had passed, Ling Han did not temper his godly bones any longer, because this had already reached the limit. In this space, he could only reach the level of half-star pseudo-divine metal. Half a star, not even a full star. This was already enough. He charged towards the tribulation clouds, wanting to retrieve heavenly tribulation fluid. Immediately, the heaven and earth flew into a rage. One after another, lightning giants at the level of peak stage Saint King tier appeared, and moved to stop Ling Han from advancing further. But in front of the present Ling Han, what could they do? Pang pang pang. He was like a heavy chariot rolling over them. The lightning giants would only be crushed into pieces. Though the lightning giants could reform, Ling Han did not take them to heart at all. So what if you had more in numbers? You would simply be crushed into smithereens. More and more lightning giants appeared, but because they were limited by the regulations of the immortal realm, peak stage Saint King tier was the maximum. At most, they could only endlessly increase their numbers, yet they had met with a freak like Ling Han. Numbers were completely meaningless in front of him. You cannot break through my defense, so even if there were billions of you, so what? He charged into the core of the tribulation clouds. Once again, a sacrificial altar appeared ahead of him. Without reservations, he went over and retrieved all the heavenly tribulation fluid in the groove. All of a sudden, the tribulation clouds dispersed. Actually, half a day's time had not passed yet, but so what? The maximum limit of their strength could no longer harm him, and even the heaven and earth had no further interest to make things difficult for him. Why did he feel like he was a bully? Ling Han scratched his head. Everyone would be shivering with fear when they spoke of the heavenly tribulation, but in his case? He actually scared off the heavenly tribulation before the time limit had been reached. He landed back on the ground, and released the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, the notionless saint, and the aunt and niece of the Long tribe from the Black Tower. However, the aunt and niece of the Long tribe were still unconscious. Ling Han shook them slightly with his origin power, and only then did they regain consciousness. Ling Han, what did you do to me? Long Yushan exclaimed in shock. She did not know how long she had been unconscious, and she worried that Ling Han might have done something unspeakable to her in this period of time. Meanwhile, Long Xiangyue's beautiful eyes shone. She very much hoped that Ling Han had done something to her that he would have to be responsible for. Ling Han chuckled and declared, "Come, let's charge back. Ling Han, I asked you a question.
Long Yushan involuntarily raised her voice when she saw that Ling Han did not answer her question. Ling Han's eyes turned cold. Wang, a frightening pressure surged out, and Long Yushan's legs involuntarily became weak. She actually flopped onto the ground. I was polite towards you, but you should not overstep your boundaries, either. From now onwards, we will go our separate ways. Ling Han, don't blame my auntie. She just has a stubborn tongue, but has no malicious intent. Long Xiangyue hurriedly said. Meanwhile, Long Yushan was biting firmly on her lower lip. Her personality was a proud one, and she would definitely not yield. Ling Han shook his head, his demeanor determined. Though he had gotten a dragon's horn from the other party, he had also solved an unwanted betrothal for her. Furthermore, he had even become deadly foes with the Open Cloud's Forbidden Land because of it. If it were not because he had wanted to kill the Open Cloud's king in the first place, who would have settled for that kind of business deal? He did not owe Long Yushan anything.
You can have the temper of a young mistress, and throw your temper around at whomever you like, but I am not going to be the one to bear with your temper.
He turned around and left. The notionless saint and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden ignored Long Yushan as well. They only nodded at Long Xiangyue before leaving, closely following in Ling Han's footsteps. Only Xiao Gu was a bit confused about the situation. It gave a yaya, and then ran after Ling Han. Chapter 1660. It's my turn, right? Ling Han had not walked back too long when he encountered a group from the Zhao tribe. When they discovered the destroyer, the Zhao tribe had also resolutely given up their plans of attacking the Lang tribe. Instead, they communicated with the Lang tribe, and the two great tribes sent out their own elites to search for Xiao Gu in this expansive area. As for Ling Han, he was an extra, and could be killed as they liked. In the ancestral teachings of every tribe, there were instructions regarding the destroyer, and that was to kill it at all costs. There were a total of 10 people in this group from the Zhao tribe, with a 9 Rings elite leading the team. When he discovered Ling Han, he was startled at first. He had not thought that he could strut right out in front of them. Thus, that 9 Rings elite faltered for a moment. Only then did he release a battle cry, sending out a summoning signal. Ling Han did not stop him. That would be just right for him, having all of them gather so he could kill them all in one go. Not too long later, multiple figures shot out and arrived.
They were all 9 Rings elites, and there were more of them that were 7 or 8 Rings elites that were rushing towards them from all directions.
However, they had not come to encircle and annihilate Ling Han and Xiao Gu, but were helping out in the search. Very good. He knows he can't escape, so he has come out to meet his death. An elder from the Zhao tribe exclaimed, his expression livid. Meanwhile, Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and he smilingly said, "Not everyone is here yet, so let's just wait a while longer." Ridiculous. An elite moved, his spiritual power condensing to form a black-colored giant elephant, which charged out to crush Ling Han. He was an elite of the Lang tribe, and had never exchanged blows with Ling Han before. As he saw it, this kind of minor character would naturally be suppressed with a single palm strike from him. Ling Han's figure flashed and dodged this blow. He calmly said, "I have always been a reasonable man, and will always give others the opportunity to choose. Now, those that are not willing to become my enemy can immediately retreat. Otherwise, when I make my move, those that are still here are all my enemies." The members of the Lang tribe and Zhao tribe all sneered. For someone who was only the equivalent of the late stage of 9 Rings, he still dared to boast so shamelessly. "I will also give you a choice. Kneel down and kowtow 100 times, and I can spare your lowly life," that elite from the Lang tribe declared coldly. Ling Han sighed and said, "Do you know that you are very irritating?" He flicked a finger, and xiao, a flash of sword light shot out. Its speed was astonishingly fast, and before anyone managed to react, it had come out through the back of the head of that elite from the Lang tribe. This elite of the Lang tribe wore a completely vacant expression, his eyes rapidly becoming dim. He collapsed onto the ground, fresh blood gushing out from him. He was already dead. Gasp. Instantly, there was a dead silence. This was a peak stage 9 Rings elite, yet he was actually insta-killed with a single strike. This was too terrifying. How could this be? Clearly, only the man with green light was the destroyer. They only had to kill him before he could get strong enough. Why was this guy even more frightening? Everyone couldn't help but take a step back, and there were some that were more cowardly that were already screaming sharply, breaking into a run. Ling Han's eyes were cold. He had already given these people a chance. Since you guys want to kill me, then you would have to be prepared to be counter-killed. How could there be something so good in this world? He flicked his finger repeatedly. Multiple flashes of sword chi danced out, and the members of the Zhao and Lang tribe collapsed one after another. Gather together! An elite shouted loudly. This reminded all of them, and they all gathered together, but in this process, at least half of them died. Impossible! The elders from the Zhao tribe all gasped. 10 days ago, he had still been forced to flee from our pursuit. How has he become so powerful now? The members of the Lang tribe wanted to cry. They should not have gotten involved in this messy situation. What business was it of theirs? Now, what were they supposed to do? All the elites joined forces, and finally managed to block Ling Han's attacks. There were about 20 peak stage 9 rings elites, and this was still very effective. And there were others rushing here. When the chiefs of the Lang tribe and Zhao tribe arrived together, everyone finally felt relief. They felt as if their pillar of support was here, and calmed down greatly. This brat! The Zhao tribe chief saw the corpses littered all over the ground, and his expression involuntarily became livid. At least half of them were elites from the Zhao tribe, yet now they had all been eliminated. In future, putting aside the question of replacing the Lang tribe, they could even be overthrown by the tribes from the middle course. He shouted loudly. Boom! He drew all the power of the tribe into his body, madly increasing his battle prowess. Multiple black patterns surged out from his body, forming many black chains. Die! He roared loudly. Those black chains immediately moved, shooting rapidly towards Ling Han, and intending to punch right through his body. Ling Han didn't even bother to dodge, and allowed these chains to hit him. Ding 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 ding. When the metal chains struck him, only multiple sparks were created from the friction. They were unable to wound him the slightest bit. What? The elites from the two tribes who had just soothed their military morale once again experienced having their hearts drop to rock bottom. Such a powerful attack did not even manage to penetrate Ling Han's defenses. This was practically enough to destroy all their hopes. The Zhao tribe chief gritted his teeth, and the metal chains suddenly wrapped tightly around Ling Han like snakes, winding round and round. Soon enough only Ling Han's head was left visible. Though they had a different cultivation system, they similarly had to accumulate spiritual power and their appreciation of great Tao. The difference was that what they comprehended was not the regulations of the ancient realm, but rather the regulations flowing in that great river at the side. Those chains were formed by the regulations that he had comprehended, and had reached the peak stage of 9 rings. He was sure that Ling Han definitely could not possibly struggle free. Who asked this brat to be too arrogant? Move quickly, I have trapped him! The Zhao tribe chief called out loudly. Charge! The Lang tribe chief and the elites of the two tribes moved at the same time, charging towards Ling Han. At this time, the threat that Ling Han posed had already exceeded Xiao Gu, and he definitely had to be killed. Ya! Xiao Gu released a furious roar. It too charged out. Meanwhile, the notionless saint and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden did not move. Firstly, they would only be going to their deaths if they did, and secondly, they were filled with confidence in Ling Han. Since he had done this, he definitely had enough certainty to succeed. About 40 peak stage 9 rings elites charged, all using their strongest attacks, which they barraged Ling Han with. Ling Han broke into a grin. How many peak stage Saint Kings had there been in that heavenly tribulation previously? Their number had exceeded the tribe's ranks by who knew how many times, yet hadn't he still dealt with them easily? Pang 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 pang. Innumerable attacks poured out, and even the earth itself was shaking. If it were not for the fact that this was very likely a part of the celestial realm, this earth could not possibly have sustained such an impact. Even so, there were still copious amounts of dust and soil flying, covering the skies. They blasted Ling Han for at least 10 breaths' time, and some of them finally slowly stopped. When the last person also stopped attacking, the dust gradually settled, and their sight became clear again. However, when they could see clearly, everyone was close to despair. Ling Han was still tied up in the chains, yet looked completely at ease.
If it wasn't for the fact that the chains wrapped around him were extremely damaged, who would believe that he had been simultaneously attacked by 49 Rings elites just moments ago?
It's my turn, right? Ling Han asked smilingly. He moved lightly, and the chains entrapping him broke apart. He stood there in his black clothes, elegant and confident. Chapter 1661. Great River Tribes. All the elites of the two tribes were numb with shock. They felt a strong coldness stream through their bodies, making them feel as if they were close to passing out. Was this guy really human? Being simultaneously attacked by about 49 Rings elites, he was actually completely unscathed. The ancestral teachings said that the person who could use green light was the destroyer, but their ancestors must have not seen the complete twists of Fati. It was not the green light user himself that brought destruction, but rather the man that was with him. Ling Han strode over, his black clothes fluttering in the breeze, yet his expression was filled with killing intent. He had never killed mindlessly, but when others had already offended him, it naturally was illogical for him to still be merciful and kind. Outsider, do you want to make an enemy of all the great river tribes? The Lang tribe chief asked coldly. His expression seemingly very calm, but anyone could hear that sliver of shakiness in his tone. This kind of strength had far surpassed his imagination, and there was not the slightest chance for him to be a match for him. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Your words are incorrect. It should be your great river tribes that want to make an enemy of me, right? If that's the case, then I will just erase you all with a single hand." How domineering! In the distance, both the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the Notionless Saint looked excited. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden even wanted to throw herself into Ling Han's arms. Even if the whole world was standing in my way, I would still charge bravely forwards. Our great river tribes have existed for who knows how many millions and millions of years. How could they be erased with a single declaration from an outsider like you? The Zhao tribe chief also exclaimed loudly. At this time, their imposing manner definitely could not be weak. What they represented was not only the Zhao tribe and the Lang tribe, but all the great river tribes. They could not lose their backbone. Ling Han turned and asked, "Xiao Gu, why do the words the great river tribes make me feel especially disgusted?" Xiao Gu slanted its head to one side, and called out, "Yaya," but felt that it did not express enough, so it began to imitate his words. "Xiao Gu, why do the words the great river tribes?" Just how much was he looking down on them? Saying it once was not enough, and they actually repeated the same words a second time. The elites of the two tribes all wore cold expressions. The great river tribes had the unyielding character of the great river tribes, and definitely would not surrender because their enemies were too strong. In their ancestral teachings, there was only suicide after being defeated in battle. There was no such thing as surrendering. 9th, 11th, 17th, when the battle starts later, you three circle around the battle towards those two over there and capture them to threaten this outsider, the Zhao tribe chief communicated through divine sense. His eyes very obscurely swept over the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the Notionless Saint. If they could use these two people to threaten Ling Han to surrender, that naturally was the best scenario. Even if they couldn't, they would still be able to force him to retreat. If he was not willing to do even this, then they would just have those two people die alongside them. Yes. The three peak stage 9 Rings elites nodded. The Lang tribe chief also issued a similar command. This was the only hope they saw of turning the situation around. You actually dare insult our grand great river tribes. All of you have to die. The Lang tribe chief roared loudly, and led all the elites of the Lang tribe against Ling Han in an offensive with a wave of his hand. The Zhao tribe did not hold back, either. All their elites also charged forwards. Actually, they all knew that this kind of attack was ineffective on Ling Han. Their purpose was only to allow the few sneak attackers to secretly sneak to Ling Han's rear and capture the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the Notionless Saint amidst the chaos of battle. Ling Han very casually flicked his fingers. Even forbidden lands only have 2 to 3 saintly medicines, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said smilingly. Ling Han nodded his head, and wrapping his arm around the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's slender waist with a smile, he said, "Fenger, we can be considered to have successfully accomplished our goal. Should we have a kiss, and work hard on having a kid?" "Go to hell," the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden spat. No matter how long she and Ling Han had been married for, she was still as bashful as she had always been. And Ling Han was only teasing her.
They hadn't found the Empress and the others, so how could he possibly be in a mood to do anything else?
They passed through the Lang tribe and continued their advance. "Come on, let's go back," Long Yushan said to Long Xiangyue softly in the distance. Long Xiangyue looked at Ling Han's receding back dumbly. She had a feeling that this might be their eternal parting. Chapter 1662. Natural Psychic Fruit. Ling Han's present strength was enough to overwhelm everything else. Actually, he did not like to kill, so every time they arrived at a new place, he would first ask for passage. If the other side was polite, then everything would be fine, but if the other was determined to make things difficult for them, then he would not be polite, either. Wasn't it just killing people? Did they think he didn't know how to do it? When he had wiped out the elites of another two tribes, all the tribes upstream and downstream were intimidated. Anywhere he went, they were all incredibly respectful, and dared not speak of any destroyer. Ling Han did nothing, either. These tribes could not leave the mystery realm, and would not create any trouble for the ancient realm, so there was no need for him to eliminate all of them.
Finally, they had traveled to the last tribe, the Tian tribe, and the part ahead of them was close to the source of the great river.
Yet it was practically a dead end ahead of them.
The further upstream they went, the more essence of power there was contained in the river waters, but the more frightening the destructive power of these waters correspondingly was.
As they walked further, large waves slammed into the banks. If only the slightest drop of river water from the splashes made contact, even 9 rings elites would be annihilated. Thus, even the strongest Tian tribe did not dare to go further upstream. Otherwise, that would only be seeking their own demise. And here, Ling Han finally met some familiar faces. There were a few young king tiers from the Star San Martial Arts Academy here, but they were not Ran Fei Yun and the other big shots, and were instead rank 3 king tiers. Clearly, there was a limited number that the Star San Saint could protect, so if he were to bring anyone, he would bring those with greatest potential rather than those whose present cultivation levels were highest. Ling Han spotted Hong Ma, the second in the world, and Zi Chun Feng, and there were also a few prodigies from the Forbidden Lands. They totaled up to over 60 people. Senior brother Ling. When these people spotted Ling Han, they all hurriedly paid their greetings. They did not know that Ling Han had become a great saint, and his battle prowess was enough to overwhelm all saints. Otherwise, even if they were old acquaintances with Ling Han, they would not dare to treat him as a peer. Ling Han nodded and asked, "Where are the others?" "Still in the fatal land ahead," someone said. Ling Han asked them closely, and found out that ahead of the Tian tribe, the great river was incredibly frightening, and even the surrounding land had become filled with killing intent, but it was in this land that a celestial medicine had appeared. Celestial medicine. Natural psychic fruit. Even in the celestial realm, this was definitely a supremely precious medicine. Once one consumed such a celestial medicine, his physique could resonate with the heaven and earth, and form the legendary Tao physique. What kind of benefits did that have?
With resonance with the heaven and earth, he himself could be claimed to be the embodiment of the regulations, so there would be no bottleneck in his cultivation. He only needed to complete the accumulation of power, and his advancement through the cultivation levels would be irresistible.
Naturally, because the natural psychic fruit had different ages, this irresistible and forceful advancement rate was also limited. Some could only reach the severing mundane tier, while some could reach the dividing soul tier, and some could reach the immortal palace tier. It was said that the oldest natural psychic fruit could help one advance to the ascending origin tier, but it was never said that it could help one advance to the celestial king tier. But that was already enough. Celestials had an unlimited lifespan, so as long as there was no barrier in their comprehension of cultivation level, how many years would accumulation of power take?
The Empress, the Saint Kings of the Forbidden Lands, and the others were all looking into how to enter that fatal land to obtain that celestial medicine, and the Tian tribe had attempted it for who knew how many generations, so they had long since given up.
Of course, if the Empress and the others managed to successfully obtain it, they would definitely move to snatch it from them. At present, there was no conflict of interest, and the Tian tribe did not want to become hostile with so many elites, either, so they allowed them to temporarily reside here. In any case, they had different cultivation systems, so there was no need to worry that these outsiders would take their resources from them. Ling Han pondered for a moment, and then decided to immediately head to that fatal land for a look. So many years had passed, and he dearly missed his wife. Of course, he missed his brother as well. He set out with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others, and Zi Chunfeng volunteered to lead the way for them. On the way, Zi Chunfeng seemed like he wanted to say something but was hesitating, looking like he was constipated. Ling Han couldn't bear it any longer and asked, "Do you want to say something?" "Senior brother Ling, there is something that I have to tell you, but you must definitely restrain yourself," Zi Chunfeng said. "All right." Ling Han nodded carelessly. Actually, there was nothing much that he had to be angry about. If there was anything displeasing to him, he would just directly crush it. In front of absolute power, was there any matter that could not be resolved? Zi Chunfeng nodded and said, "When we entered this place, we also encountered a very young elite. He has already cultivated to the peak stage of Saint King tier, and even those lords were incredibly polite towards him." He paused and said, "That young Saint King seems to admire senior sister Luan Xing very much." Ling Han laughed in spite of himself. This guy feared that he would get jealous and pick a fight with that young Saint King. The Empress's charms were irresistible. Ling Han had long since learnt self-restraint. Otherwise, if he would get jealous every single time someone looked at his wife, then wouldn't he be dead from jealousy? He naturally had absolute trust in the Empress. No matter how many or how outstanding her pursuers were, it would be completely useless. Of course, admiring was their own business, but if someone still insisted on shamelessly pestering her even after rejection, then he would definitely not be polite. "Got it," Ling Han stated, completely not taking the matter to heart. Xiao Gu was restless. After meeting fresh people, its urge to imitate speech could not be held back. However, it recalled that Ling Han had said that imitating others was not good, so it forcefully suppressed the urge, but felt extraordinarily uncomfortable doing so. Half a day later, they finally approached that fatal land. True enough, they had not even reached the place, but they could already feel a harsh air rush out towards them, making everyone feel as if there were knives slicing at their faces. Zi Chunfeng immediately stopped and said, "Senior brother Ling, this is already my limit. I cannot take another step further." He was also considerably extraordinary, and the 5 years he had spent here had greatly improved his cultivation level. He'd advanced into the peak of the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier. Even with such a cultivation level, he could still walk until this place. As expected of a king tier. Ling Han smiled and said, "It's all right." He set up a shield of origin power, and protected Zi Chunfeng previously. He had not used origin power at all, and was only using his physique itself to resist, yet it was sturdier than the defense of any Saint King. Zi Chunfeng was incredibly stunned. He looked dumbly at Ling Han. This feat was something that even many Saint Kings were unable to accomplish. They would only be able to set up a shield that would allow their own advance. Thus, he had completely no idea what was ahead of them all this while. "Let's go." Ling Han did not only put up a defense for Zi Chunfeng. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the Notionless Saint were not exempted, either. As for Xiao Gu, there was no need for him to worry. This guy was incredibly strange. The four of them walked ahead, with Xiao Gu bringing up the rear. It gazed around, its head slanted to one side. Occasionally, green light would be flickering in its eyes, as if there was something here that had incited a reaction from it. Chapter 1663. Another visitor from the celestial realm. Ling Han also embraced the Empress's slender waist tightly, going around in a few circles with her in his arms, and only then did he kiss her hard. Having been parted for 8 years, he missed her very much. The Empress also responded passionately, her icy pride completely dispersed, and she had become a bewitching demoness that could melt anyone with her hot passion. Every inch of her was exuding so much seduction that no one could bear it. Xiao Gu watched from one side, its head slanted to one side. It couldn't help but approach, and copied Ling Han's action in asking for a hug. "Stop, stop, stop. This is my wife. Don't copy what I do." Ling Han hurriedly stopped him. Xiao Gu presently did not just like imitating speech, it was beginning to imitate even actions. Usually it was fine, but when it concerned his wife, ho ho, forget about it. Xiaogu was confused and called out, Yaya, feeling a bit despondent. Who is he? The Empress asked curiously. Why did he look exactly like Ling Han? We'll talk about it in future. Ling Han switched to holding the Empress's hand and walked towards the Star Sand Saint. Smiling, he asked, Everyone, have you discovered anything? The Star Sand Saint, the Tranquil Heart Saint, and the other 10 saints of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy were all here. They all shook their heads with a grimace and replied, The celestial medicine is just in front of us, but we can't get hold of it. This is really depressing.
Woof, little Han. Pay your greetings quickly now that you have seen me.
The large black dog ran over.
It looked at Xiaogu, yet all of a sudden, all the black fur on its body bristled. Monster!
It jumped up, baring its teeth.
Monster!
Xiaogu thought it was fun, and copied it.
You're the monster here.
The large black dog was furious.
You're the monster here.
Xiaogu was copying him with great pleasure.
Don't copy my words. Don't copy my words.
You are an idiot that doesn't know how to talk. You are an idiot that doesn't know how to talk. Whatever the large black dog said, Xiaogu would imitate him word for word. No matter how the large black dog changed the speed of speech, sometimes quick and sometimes slow, Xiaogu would always manage to imitate him without any change. Soon enough, the large black dog suffered a breakdown. He sprawled out on the ground, his ears drooping. Whatever he didn't hear would not make him mad. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. It was rare to see the large black dog at a disadvantage. This was really bringing satisfaction for everyone.
Yaya.
Meanwhile, Xiaogu smiled dumbly.
So you are Ling Han?
The young Saint King from before walked over. He was really very young, only a few tens of thousands years old, but not only had he advanced into the Genesis tier, he had also reached the peak of the consummate level of the Genesis tier.
Ling Han's eyes swept over him, and was startled slightly because he could sense an aura that was different from other Saint Kings on this young Saint King.
Consummate regulations. Like Han Qi, he had also come from the celestial realm. No wonder he had managed to become a peak stage Saint King at such a young age. Being nurtured with the resources of the celestial realm, how could he not advance at such a fast pace? However, compared with Hunyo, he was completely no match. In a mere 5 years, Hunyo was already in the Genesis tier. I am Ling Han, how should I address you? Ling Han looked at the other man.
Pang Zhen, the young Saint King replied, his face bearing an expression of pride.
This was natural.
He had come from the celestial realm, and everyone here added together was not as precious as a single finger of his. If it was not for the fact that there was a celestial medicine here, as well as an exquisitely beautiful empress, how could he possibly have wasted 5 years' time here?
Ling Han only gave an "oh," and ignored him after.
Why you?
Pang Zhen couldn't help but feel angered. What kind of attitude was that?
He was only a mere great saint, and actually dared put on airs in front of him. Hang on.
Pang Zhen's heart shuddered. Such a young great saint.
He could no longer see through Ling Han, but was sure that his flame of life had been burning for only 1,000 years at most.
The mere ancient realm actually had such a freak. He involuntarily glanced at the Empress. This exquisite beauty had also reached the peak stage of the medium saint tier, and her battle prowess was even comparable to the peak stage of Saint King tier. What was going on with the ancient realm? Was it specialized in producing freaks?
Friend Ling.
The Saint Kings from the various forbidden lands also greeted Ling Han. When they realized that Ling Han's cultivation level had already advanced into the great saint tier, they were both astonished and pleased. Their joy was derived from the fact that they would soon be entering into the celestial realm, and their astonishment came from the fact that Ling Han had already reached such heights when only a few years had passed. They felt like they were living in a dream. Ling Han nodded, and did not become arrogant just because he was capable of overwhelming all elites. He smiled and greeted the Saint Kings. Then he turned and looked ahead and asked, "Can't you pluck that celestial medicine?" "Completely impossible." A young man walked over, his tone aged and experienced.
You are.
Ling Han looked at him.
Fuck, I am the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire.
The youth immediately jumped up and shouted in displeasure. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "We haven't seen each other for a few years. You've grown up." "Tui, don't say it in such a disgusting way. When I was moving unhindered in the world before, who knows where your ancestors were still drinking milk?" The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire exclaimed in displeasure.
Why can't it be done?
Ling Han returned to the previous topic of conversation. The regulations here are too frightening. They are not something that can be matched by Genesis tier. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire became serious again. It is still all right now, but there would be violent hurricanes of regulations streaking out at any time. Going by my estimation, even immortal palace tiers could possibly be plundered to death by these winds. Only now did Ling Han really get a shock. Immortal palace tiers were already standing on the third tier in the Celestial Realm, and above that would be Ascending Origin tier and Celestial King tier.
If this kind of regulations hurricane could plunder immortal palace tiers to death, then the highest level of power here would at least have to be Ascending Origin tier.
Within a banished ancient land, there actually appeared power on the level of Ascending Origin tier at least. This was inconceivable. On the other side, Pang Zhan's expression was dark, and he felt an urge to commit murder. He was a prodigy of the Celestial Realm, but look at the situation now. So many people were actually gathering around Ling Han, and even the woman that he had his eye on had thrown herself into Ling Han's arms. Humph, these people only wanted to enter into the Celestial Realm, and that was why they were fawning so much on this young man. A thought flashed in Pang Zhan's head. He could release some information at an appropriate time. Not only was he capable of opening the doors to the Celestial Realm, he himself was even the descendant of a great force of the Celestial Realm. You mere Genesis tiers would only be ants after entering into the Celestial Realm, so how would you be able to survive without depending on the backing of a great force? However, he did not dare take anyone into the Celestial Realm. This was an ironclad rule of the Celestial Realm. If it was discovered that anyone had secretly brought anyone into the Celestial Realm, there would be a Celestial King level force that would arrive personally and annihilate the entire clan. Something like that had happened in the past. In an Ascending Origin tier level force, there was a junior that had entered into the ancient realm for training, and developed an ill-fated relationship. He was cruel, and abandoned the woman, only bringing his own child into the Celestial Realm, but what was the result? In a moment of carelessness, it was discovered that the child was born in the ancient realm, and it resulted in the entire force being eliminated overnight. That was an Ascending Origin tier level force. Chapter 1664. Source of the Great River. Natural Psychic Fruit. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire licked his lips. If it is capable of boosting cultivation up to Ascending Origin tier, then that would be a supreme precious treasure to even me. Grandpa dogs, it's all grandpa dogs. The large black dog jumped out. You damn kid, don't you know how to respect your elders and betters? I have not seen any betters, but I do see a shameless old dog. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire laughed mockingly. You dare insult me? Woof. The large black dog immediately broke into a fight with the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire. Ling Han ignored this pair of jokers. He looked ahead. There was a black aura rising from the land. It was very calm, and a plant was presently growing about 10 miles ahead of them, exuding a shimmering light of Tao. Natural Psychic Fruit, the embodiment of the regulations of heaven and earth. In theory, its value surpassed any other kind of celestial medicines. Of course, if you were unlucky, and encountered one that was not mature enough, and could only boost your cultivation to severing mundane tier, you could only cry. Yeah. Xiao Gu also looked ahead, but it was not looking at the natural psychic fruit, but rather a farther area. In truth, after 100 miles, even the vision of the saints would start to fail them. They would only be able to see gusts of black chi rising, whereas the other areas were all obscure. As it watched, Xiao Gu's expression involuntarily changed. Green light appeared from its eyes again, and it revealed an expression of fury. Suddenly it loudly roared, "Yaya!" Then it charged out. Ling Han didn't manage to stop it in time. He wanted to chase after it, but realized that the black aura had become as sharp as blades in the process of running, and posed a frightening threat to him. He could not execute the full effects of even the extreme speed of lightning flash. He did not manage to stop it,
and Xiao Gu had already charged to a very far spot like a gust of wind.
This guy should not have gone off to die. Ling Han slowly retreated. In this place, his physique was useless as well because even immortal palasteers could be killed, so how could his merely half-star pseudo-divine metal physique be enough? Gasp! All the Saint Kings exclaimed in shock because Xiao Gu had already rushed 6 to 7 miles ahead, far exceeding their limits. This guy could possibly pluck the celestial medicine. Everyone was greatly pleased. As long as the celestial medicine could be plucked, then they would have hopes of snatching it. Otherwise, they could only stay here and watch helplessly. Not good. However, the masses soon cried out. Xiao Gu's body was crumbling, completely unable to bear the damage caused by this fatal land. Ling Han, meanwhile, was not too worried. This body was only formed by Xiao Gu. Its true form was a bone. As long as its true form was not destroyed, it could easily form another body again. Pa pa pa. Xiao Gu's flesh and blood fell piece by piece, and very soon there was only a skeleton left behind, yet it was still running swiftly forwards. It had already arrived at the side of the celestial medicine. But contrary to everyone's expectations, Xiao Gu did not stop, and continued running forwards at a quick pace. This. Everyone was baffled. You have sacrificed so much, yet actually did not pluck the celestial medicine right in front of you. Have you gone blind? Xiao Gu was still running.
Its bones were falling off one after another, and finally there was only one left, and that was its true form, which was exuding a shimmering green light.
It rushed into that boundless area of black aura.
The moment the distance of 100 miles was surpassed by it, no one was capable of catching sight of Xiao Gu.
It had completely disappeared without a trace. Everyone exchanged looks, their expressions completely dumbfounded. What the hell is this? Yet Ling Han came up with a thought.
Xiao Gu was completely incompatible with the natives here, and the fundamental reason was the cultivation system of the natives here, and all this originated from the Great River. To be exact, it was the source of the Great River.
And now, Xiao Gu was charging towards it. No one could see what happened after that, and they could only wait. After 3 days, they saw green light flickering in the distance. Xiao Gu very quickly appeared. Its whole body was encircled with green light. Of course, it was still just a bone, and charged out of the black aura at a run. It stopped in front of Ling Han, and reformed flesh and blood. Then, it released a feeble yaya, and passed out. Had Xiao Gu gone to the source of the Great River? If yes, what had it encountered there? It seemed to have gone through a bloody battle, and sustained very severe injuries. It looked completely exhausted. Everyone was curious, but Xiao Gu had not regained consciousness, so there was no one for them to ask. Ling Han voiced a question to Small Tower, and asked, "Do you know what's going on here?" Small Tower was silent for a moment before answering, "This is a completely new cultivation system. I too have never heard of it. Different cultivation systems should correspond to a different natural environment. This is too bizarre. Can you use the power of the Black Tower to help me enter into this area?" Ling Han asked again.
"If you think that you've lived long enough, you can give it a try," Small Tower said, as sharp-tongued as it had always been.
Ling Han naturally would not take it to heart.
Otherwise, he would have long since died of fury. He then asked, "Then what about Xiao Gu?
Can you distinguish its origins?" Again, Small Tower didn't reply right away, and finally said, "I have some guesses. It should be related to a celestial king, but as for the details, I am not very sure, either. After all, I have not completely recovered." Related to a celestial king. Ling Han was stunned, but immediately nodded. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had said that this black aura was capable of even killing immortal palace tiers, so it was very possible that it could be battle prowess on the level of Celestial King tier. Then, seeing as Xiao Gu was able to enter and return from it, it could be imagined that it had some relation with a Celestial King. 3 days later, Xiao Gu regained consciousness.
Yaya! It seemed to have completely forgotten the matter of its previous injuries, and called out happily, looking very energetic.
This recovery ability was really quite incredible.
"Xiao Gu, what did you see inside?"
Ling Han asked. Xiao Gu said, "Yaya," for a while. It only knew how to imitate speech, and the only phrase it could say independently was, "Yaya." After making signs and gesturing for a long time, there was still no conclusion, which made everyone extremely anxious. "I really want to bite this guy," the large black dog muttered, but he was only grumbling. He definitely did not dare do such a thing. His eyes were very sharp, and he could tell how extraordinary Xiao Gu was. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, "Xiao Gu, do you know how to do this?" He plucked out a portion of his memories, and turned it into images. "Yaya." Xiao Gu immediately nodded. It also drew out a finger, and a memory image immediately appeared. Fast forward a bit. Fast forward a bit. Very quickly, the scene of Xiao Gu charging into the black aura appeared. Ling Han did not ask it to fast forward again, but was rather watching with full concentration. The others were also the same. They were almost killed by their curiosity. What kind of secret was actually hidden within this black aura? And what was there at the source of the great river? Why was it that a river could nurture so many elites, and a completely different cultivation system had even appeared? They saw that as Xiao Gu charged into the black aura, there was very quickly only a bone left, and it was releasing green light, which resisted the corrosive ability of the black aura. It charged forwards. However, Xiao Gu's speed was also gradually slowing. This black aura exerted a tremendous pressure on it. When even Xiao Gu could no longer bear it, and could only turn back, the great river had reached its source, and a massive black shadow appeared ahead. That was a corpse. With this man and dog interrupting, it instantly decreased the threatening effect of Pang Zhan's words sharply, making it seem as if he was joking. Pang Zhan couldn't help but humph coldly, and pressed out a hand in the direction of the large black dog and the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire. "Both of you shut up." The large black dog and the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire hurriedly dodged in a flash. Chapter 1666. Suffering the consequences of his own actions. The Empress immediately stopped, turned around, and smiled beautifully at Ling Han. It was like 10 million flowers had bloomed at the same time, indescribably beautiful. Ling Han couldn't help but take a step forwards, wrapping his arms around the Empress's slender waist, and planted a kiss on her red lips. The Empress responded passionately, her black locks cascading down like a waterfall. "Those who make a public display of affection will die very fast," the large black dog mumbled. "Damn couple," the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire remarked next. "Woof, you dare insult your grandpa dog?" The large black dog immediately jumped up, and aimed a bite at the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire. Pang Zhen's face was livid. "Are you guys done yet?" Ling Han paid him no regard at all, and merely kissed his beautiful wife deeply. "Damn it!" Pang Zhen roared loudly, leaping out and stretching out a hand to grab Ling Han. He was going to kill this man. But Ling Han did not even raise his head, and very casually flicked out a finger. Suddenly, a flash of sword chi swept out, dazzling the skies. Yet Pang Zhen's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly channeled his full power into defense. Wang, multiple streaks of golden light surged out of his body, forming a shield in front of him, and there was shockingly the character Pang on the shield. Pang, the sword chi landed on the shield, and this shield was immediately sliced in half. The might of the sword chi did not decrease, and continued to slash out. With a pu, there was a spurt of blood from Pang Zhen's chest. His whole person had been forced back about 50 meters, his feet creating very deep grooves in the ground, and only then did he stop. Wah! He spat out a mouthful of blood, his face turning completely pale at first before flushing red. He looked at Ling Han in shock, completely unable to believe what had just happened. He was just a great saint, yet could actually defeat him so easily. This was too unjust. Wait, could it be? His heart involuntarily shuddered. So this young man had cultivated 10 million stars before breaking through to the Genesis tier? Otherwise, with a gap of more than a minor level, there was definitely no possible way he could have been defeated, and so horribly at that. Wait, there was that woman as well. He turned towards the Empress again.
This exquisite beauty must have also cultivated 10 million stars before breaking through to the Genesis tier, and that was why she was strong enough to oppose him. And this scene also caused the Blue Feather Saint King and the others to kneel down in astonishment. Indeed, it was just as they had predicted. Once Ling Han advanced into the Great Saint tier, he would be frighteningly strong. Just ask, who could possibly match him in the entire ancient realm? Only now did Ling Han raise his head. The Empress's beautiful face bore a red blush, and was so incredibly dazzling that even those saints felt their hearts throb wildly, though all of them maintained a solemn expression, not daring to show the slightest bit of their emotions. You had to be joking. Ling Han presently was already strong enough to kill anyone in his way. Who dared to have ideas about his woman?
Were they tired of living? Moreover, they were still hoping that Ling Han could bring them into the celestial realm. Pang Zhen gritted his teeth. The celestial medicine was too attractive, so he was not satisfied to just leave like that.
He suddenly drew out a jade pendant and declared, "If you don't want to die, hand over the celestial medicine obediently.
Otherwise, when I burst this forbidden tool, all of you will have to die." He was not just throwing around threats here. This jade pendant had been bestowed on him by his elders, and after bursting, it could release a terrifying power on the level of pseudo-severing mundane tier. No matter even if you were a Saint King, in front of the power of a pseudo-severing mundane tier, your only fate would be being turned into ashes.
"Oh, what item is that?"
Ling Han asked, very intrigued. Pang Zhen felt like he was about to go crazy. Was this the time to be curious what item this was? Why was it so difficult to communicate with this person?
He exclaimed, "Don't force me."
This is a forbidden tool, and possesses boundless might. All those below the severing mundane tier will die. Just because you say it possesses boundless might, it does? I don't believe it. Ling Han shook his head. Fuck. A muscle twitched in Pang Zhen's cheek. He really did not want to use this forbidden tool, because when this attack surged out, not only Ling Han would die, even the Empress would also die. He slightly hated to do it. He would really be unable to find another woman of such exquisite beauty. Ling Han, the Blue Feather Saint King and the others called out. Judging by the look of Pang Zhen, he did not seem like he was just pulling a bluff. If you have the guts, then just burst it. Yet Ling Han was still provoking Pang Zhen. Pang Zhen finally could no longer bear it. In any case, if he could not kill Ling Han, he could not possibly obtain the Empress, either. Since that was the case, if he couldn't obtain her, then no one should have her, either. Suddenly, he burst the jade pendant. Banish! Ling Han pressed out a hand, and Pang Zhen's whole person instantly disappeared. But it was only a moment. Boom! A frightening storm of energy suddenly appeared out of nowhere, sweeping out in all directions. However, it was only peak stage Saint King in power at most, and was completely insufficient to deal a fatal strike against them. It was very simple. Pang Zhen and that forbidden tool had been banished together, but because the might that forbidden tool had released was too frightening, it had burst out even when the banishment period had not ended, but it was also because of this that a large amount of the power had been used on exploding the void, causing the might of the forbidden tool to be decreased greatly. Instead, it was Pang Zhen who suffered. At first, it was impossible that he would also be affected by the might of the forbidden tool, because he was in the center. However, who asked him to be banished with it together into a sealed-off space? The violent energy endlessly crashed and ricocheted in the space, and naturally struck him fatally first. And now, there was really not the slightest bit left of him. He had suffered the consequences of his own actions. The Blue Feather Saint King and the others were all gaping with shock. The matter was resolved just like that. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Now that we're done, let's pack up and leave. Everyone, it's about time that we can return." The Saint Kings all nodded in agreement blankly, and felt that everything was so surreal. Only after a long time had passed did they return to their senses. Since Ling Han had become a great saint, that meant that they would be able to enter into the celestial realm. They all expressed the desire to return to their own forbidden lands and make some preparations, then immediately bring all their clansmen to seek out Ling Han again. Meanwhile, Ling Han said there was no rush. He would still stay in the ancient realm for at least 10 years. Why? He was going to freeload off the heavenly tribulation of others. He wanted to obtain a great volume of heavenly tribulation fluid before he left. Everyone returned.
Though the Tian tribe knew that the celestial medicine had already been plucked, they did not speak a word of it. With the reputation Ling Han had established through his martial feats, who would dare covet something that had already entered his pocket?
2 days later, all the outsiders left the Tian tribe and came to the Yuan tribe where they had first arrived.
As long as they had not reached the peak stage of the Saint King tier, they could cultivate here, and it was definitely capable of boosting their cultivation rate a good few times.
All the Saint Kings left. They had to return as soon as possible to make their preparations for entering the celestial realm. Ling Han also left. He was going to go to the Great Ling Empire and choose a few people to bring into the celestial realm. Before he left, he warned everyone not to be in a rush to break through. No matter what, they had to wait until he returned. In any case, with his current speed, a return trip would only take 2 years at most. Everyone naturally agreed, and Ling Han set off. This time, he only brought the Empress with him because the Empress had reached the peak stage of the medium saint tier, and did not need to further increase her origin power, and only needed comprehension of cultivation level, so she needed the help of the reincarnation tree. The Empress went into seclusion for comprehension inside the Black Tower, while Ling Han headed towards the Great Ling Empire, stepping on the golden pathway. This would be his final trip to the Great Ling Empire. If he ever came back, it would definitely be when he returned from the celestial realm. Chapter 1667. Banquet. With Ling Han's speed, returning to Joint Peace Planet really did not need too much time. After advancing into the Great Saint tier, the limits of his cultivation level continued to be unlocked. He had gained a breakthrough improvement in the lightning flash. Though his speed had not increased, the time that he could continuously use it had been extended considerably. At first, he had estimated he would arrive in about a year's time, but in truth, he had only taken 9 months' time because he had used lightning flash in the journey to speed himself up, which saved him as much as 3 months' time. After returning to the Great Ling Empire, Ling Han did not make a great fanfare of it, but when Feng Piyun and the others knew that he had become a saint, they were still incredibly surprised and pleased, and were determined to throw a celebration for him. When the news spread out, the elites from the surrounding great stars all arrived personally firstly, to see it with their own eyes, and secondly, they did not dare be absent. As Saint had succeeded Dao, and you actually did not come to offer your congratulations? Were you looking down on the Saint? This feast naturally needed some time to prepare, and Ling Han began his work of moving people. Those by his side naturally entered into the Black Tower, but it was impossible that Ling Han would be so trusting of every single person, and allow the Black Tower to become public knowledge. He began to forge spatial god tools, and when the time came, he would only have to place people inside, and he would be able to bring a few more people with him. Moreover, he had no plans of bringing too many people into the celestial realm. Firstly, everyone was far from touching the ceiling to their cultivation, and it was completely fine for them to stay in the ancient realm first and reach the heavenly body tier, eternal river tier, and Genesis tier. Secondly, he had no foundations at all in the celestial realm. If he brought a lot of people with him, what kind of arrangements should he make for them? And in future, after he advanced into the severing mundane tier, he would be able to freely travel to and fro between the celestial realm and ancient realm. He just had to be faster to avoid the fate of having his lifespan severed. 5 days later, the elites from the chaotic star's majestic empire were the first to arrive. There were the left and right ministers and the great generals. In this galaxy, they were elites that stood at the apex, but in front of the present Ling Han, they did not even dare to stand up straight. Saint, that was the true dragon from the 9 heavens. The left minister was also rueful. In the past, he had even warned Ling Han to keep his distance from his youngest daughter, and thought that Ling Han was unworthy to associate with her, but now, if he had known that Ling Han would become a saint, how could he have possibly objected? Who knew? He might already be the father-in-law of a saint by now. Sigh. However, Li Weiwei and Ling Han's relations were still amicable. In truth, the two of them only had a very pure friendship. It was only the left minister himself who had a misconception. This girl was very carefree, and the moment she spotted him she shouted, "Ling Han! Ling Han! Girl!" The left minister's face had turned green from shock, and hurriedly pulled his daughter back. "That is a saint.
You have to respectfully pay your greetings.
Li Weiwei gave a small pout. She thought that there was not much that had changed in Ling Han as compared to the past, so why did she suddenly have to pay her greetings now? She did not dare disobey her father, primarily because the left minister's present expression was too pitiful. If she dared call out Ling Han again, her old father would probably pass out from the extreme anxiety.
She gave a slight curtsy, about to bow, yet Ling Han had already reached her, and stretched out his hands into the air.
A force immediately stopped her from continuing to bow.
Ling Han smiled and asked, "What need is there for you to be so reserved with me?"
That's right. Li Weiwei had not wanted to bow in the first place, and immediately went along with the flow.
Little Han, you are very incredible now.
Ling Han laughed. That's right. Who do you think I am?
In front of friends. He did not mind a little teasing.
Ji Yuner also came, pursing her lips in a smile at the sidelines.
In the past, among the three great beauties of the imperial capital, only she and Li Weiwei had not married, and their presence here also caught the attention of others, especially because they had a connection with Ling Han, which caused a considerable number of forces to have some ideas. If they could marry these two women, then wouldn't they have boarded Ling Han's great ship? Of course, it was not everyone that dared have such thoughts, fearing that Ling Han had some relationship with the two women that they were unaware of.
What if they were lovers? Then they really would be seeking their own deaths.
Half a month later, the elites from the other great stars also gradually arrived, and another half-month later, the great banquet officially began. Ling Han sat high up on the throne, while there were masses beneath. There were as many as hundreds of thousands of people, and everywhere he looked, there were heads. Meanwhile, seated at his side were his two brothers, Feng Peyun and Murong Qing, and his uncle, Yuzhen Shan, and cousin Yu Kaiyu, were seated on the other. The two of them were the most shocked. Previously, Ling Han had united the whole lower realm, and even opened the sky and entered into the immortal realm. This was already unfathomable to them, but they had never imagined that Ling Han would be invincible even in the immortal realm by now, and was about to enter into the celestial realm. Celestial realm, the final land of immortality.
Ling Han.
The Empress sent a mental thought to Ling Han from inside the Black Tower. With a thought from Ling Han, the Empress was summoned out.
Sister-in-law.
Both Feng Peyun and Murong Qing greeted. They knew that the Empress was in seclusion inside the Black Tower. Yu Kaiyu also greeted her, but did not dare look too long at her. This sister-in-law was too beautiful. The Empress nodded in response. If it were not for the fact that these three men were Ling Han's elder brothers, she would not have paid them any regard.
She was really too proud.
About to break through? Ling Han asked.
The Empress nodded.
Wait for me.
She took a step, and had already arrived in the galaxy.
The great saint tribulation that she had to undergo was also incredibly terrifying. More frightening even than the Saint King tribulation that others had to go through.
If she did not hurry to leave, Joint Peace Planet would no longer exist.
Your Majesty.
The left minister and the others hurriedly bowed.
They were relatively more reverent of the Empress. After all, they had been cautiously living under the Empress's authority for about 1 million years.
Boom! Lightning suddenly appeared in the galaxy.
Even if there was a boundless distance separating them, it could still be clearly seen. Multiple giants of lightning thousands of meters tall appeared, surrounding and attacking the Empress in the galaxy. Everyone's faces turned pale as they watched that sea-like lightning, breaking out in a cold sweat. Even if they were standing here, they could still feel how frightening that lightning was.
Her Majesty
has also become a saint. The left minister and the others were all incredibly surprised and joyous. In their eyes, the stronger the Empress, the better, naturally. They were all soldiers under the Empress's rule. Long live your Majesty. The people that belonged to the chaotic star's majestic empire all knelt and bowed. The people of the Great Ling Empire, meanwhile, bore smiles of pride. No matter how strong the Empress was, she was still their kingswoman. Ling Han's figure leaped, and he also entered the galaxy. He wanted to freeload the Empress's heavenly tribulation, and get himself some heavenly tribulation fluid. At present, the Empress was able to match this kind of heavenly tribulation, but was unable to forcefully enter into the heavenly tribulation to obtain the heavenly tribulation fluid. After all, The Empress did not have as strong a physique as he did, and could not bear being attacked simultaneously by as many as millions and millions of peak stage Saint Kings. She could only do so after she became a Saint King.
And that wasn't certain, either. Ling Han stretched out a hand, delivering an attack at a lightning giant.
Being crushed by the frightening power, the lightning giants immediately crumbled, and the heaven and earth was furious.
New tribulation clouds appeared, forming a second heavenly tribulation. Above Joint Peace Planet, everyone was watching with gaping mouths. There actually was someone that would actively trifle with the heavenly tribulation. If this was any other person, that would be an idiot, but in Ling Han's case, he was a freak. Boom! Ling Han directly entered into the innermost depths of the heavenly tribulation. He wanted to finish this as soon as possible. Chapter 1668. Clearing off old debts. How could the heavenly tribulation stop Ling Han? Its might had already reached the limits of the immortal realm, and even if Ling Han was helping the Empress undergo her heavenly tribulation, which logically would increase the might of the heavenly tribulation 10 times further, how was it supposed to increase by now? Boom, boom, boom. The heaven and earth was raging furiously, but only more lightning giants appeared.
Ling Han did not pay them any regard at all.
Like with a chariot rolling out, pung, 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 any lightning giant would be crushed. Though they could still reform, they were completely unable to stop Ling Han's advance. Very soon, he had charged into the depths of the tribulation clouds, and easily obtained the heavenly tribulation fluid. The heavenly tribulation suddenly vanished. On Joint Peace Planet, everyone was once again dumbfounded. What on earth is going on? The heaven and earth would also bully the weak and fear the strong? Why had the heavenly tribulation just struck a few times and then ran off? Ling Han watched from the sidelines. The Empress had just broken through, and could use the heavenly tribulation to temper her battle prowess, but right before the heavenly tribulation was about to dissipate, he had charged into the tribulation clouds and obtained a portion of heavenly tribulation fluid again. The two of them exchanged a smile, and walked back to Joint Peace Planet holding hands. Everyone knelt down and bowed, numb with excitement. 2 saints in one family, what kind of concept was this?
Putting aside Joint Peace Planet, even in the whole galaxy and all the galaxies around, that was incredibly impressive. They did not know that Ling Han and the Empress's battle prowess could actually overwhelm all Saint Kings, or there would probably be a great many people that would pass out from the excitement.
Congratulations, sister-in-law. Feng Peyun and the others all approached to offer their congratulations.
Though Li Weiwei and Ji Yuner behaved very casually with Ling Han, and were very carefree when they spent time together, they were like tame lambs that had seen a tiger in front of the Empress, and were not able to even take a step forwards. Instead, it was the left minister and the others that came forwards with congratulations. In any case, they had been incredibly reverent towards the Empress in the past, so there was not much difference now. The banquet had yet to end, but Ling Han had brought the Empress with him and ran. They had separated for 8 years, and had not spent many days together when the Empress began her seclusion period. Now that she had successfully accomplished her goal, they naturally had to work hard a bit on having children. The night of romance was always too short. Ling Han and the Empress clung together for a whole 8 days before ending their loving time together, and did some serious business. Another month later, everyone was prepared. Ling Han took those closest to him, such as Yu Zhanshan, Feng Peyun, and the others, into the Black Tower, whereas the others were drawn into a spatial god tool, and then moved to leave. He delegated the responsibility for the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire and the Great Ling Empire to the Left Minister and the others, and Ling Han spent some more effort to lay out a saint-level formation. As long as the formation was here, then even a great saint would not be able to do anything against them. It was not that Ling Han was not coming back. With the extended lifespans of cultivators of the immortal realm, even if he went off to the celestial realm and came back only 10,000 years later, there would actually not be too much change here. He could leave with an easy heart. 9 months later, Ling Han returned to Woodfigure Planet, and then directly went to the Mystery Realm. That mystery realm that had a different cultivation system was now called the Great River Mystery Realm because the natives inside all shared this identical label. Ling Han released everyone from inside the spatial god tool. If they cultivated here, the effects would be a good many times better. However, when he had just entered into the Great River Mystery Realm,
Ling Han gave a soft "E." Compared to more than a year ago, the spiritual qi of this place had weakened slightly, though it was still very dense compared to other places. This initially was a completely sealed-off world, and now that it had been opened, it was inevitable that the spiritual qi would leak out. Going by that theory, there would ultimately come a day when this mystery realm would become ordinary, just like that frightening corpse inside. It would also completely vanish one day, and the inheritance and traditions of the natives would completely die out by then. Ling Han felt internally rueful, but the others were endlessly pleased and surprised. The spiritual qi of this place was too dense, so much so that they did not even dare imagine it could be this way. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others were naturally still at the Yuan tribe. Ling Han had just arrived when a few of them said that they were about to break through. Everyone underwent heavenly tribulation one after another, and Ling Han continued to freeload off their heavenly tribulation. He could even disperse the heavenly tribulation for someone because this heaven and earth could no longer do anything to him. But when the 10th person underwent the heavenly tribulation, and Ling Han barged in, he discovered that the heavenly tribulation actually ignored him completely. There were no new tribulation clouds appearing, as if the heaven and earth also knew that they had no effect on him, so they were too lazy to even bother. How could that be allowed? Ling Han directly charged into that person's heavenly tribulation, but something that caused him depression happened. The tribulation cloud shrank, and instantly vanished. Fled. The heavenly tribulation actually fled. The Empress and the others were also very astonished, but then they all broke into laughter. This Ling Han was really a freak, scaring the heavenly tribulation into fleeing. This was something that had never happened before. Then didn't that mean that as long as Ling Han was willing, he could make it so that there would be no more heavenly tribulation in the whole immortal realm? Ling Han tried a few more times. It was of no use. Now, as long as he interfered in anyone else's heavenly tribulation, not only would there be no new heavenly tribulation targeting him, even the heavenly tribulation of others would also vanish. This brought the others amusement, but they couldn't help but also feel rueful. To exactly what extent was this guy strong that he could even make the heavenly tribulation turn and flee before him? Ling Han gave up the idea of obtaining heavenly tribulation fluid again. He planned to make another attempt when he headed to the netherworld in future. Since the two realms were separated, then they each naturally had their own bosses. Now that the heaven and earth of the immortal realm had turned its back on him, he should still have a chance in the netherworld. There were already Saint Kings coming back from the nearest forbidden lands, bringing their clansmen to cultivate inside the Great River Mystery Realm. Though the environment inside the Celestial Realm could possibly be like this as well, they had nothing else to do at the moment anyways, so what was the point of wasting time? However, Ling Han set out once more. He still had many old debts to clear off with certain forbidden lands. In the past, they had coveted the Celestial King technique he possessed, and joined forces to attack him. He had only killed a single Open Cloud's king, but did those that were left now think that they were spared because of that? Ling Han was not bloodthirsty, but he was not so generous that he could smile and consider the matter forgotten when others had bullied him. The first place he went to was the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. The 8 Stones Forbidden Land still had one Saint King, but he was not at the peak stage. However, even if he was a peak stage Saint King, he would not be a match for Ling Han. What was this kind of Saint King worth? Ling Han wasted all the cultivation levels of everyone in the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, and did not commit a massacre. In future they would still be able to develop. That would be with their own abilities, but judging by the look of things now, the link of karma between them and Ling Han could be considered to have been ended. However, Ling Han would naturally not forget about ransacking them. He obtained 3 pieces of saintly material, 12 saint tools, as well as 2 saintly medicines. Ling Han did not care whether it was saintly material or a saint tool. As long as it was made of level 17 godly metal, he would have the divine demon sword swallow it. Probably, with all the forbidden lands added together, it would be enough to boost the divine demon sword to level 18. Next, he would be going to the celestial realm to increase its grade. However, with how bountiful the resources were in the celestial realm, this obviously would not be a problem. After leaving the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, Ling Han toured the forbidden lands one after another. There were more and more saintly materials and saintly medicines in his possession, and when he swept through the stock of the 13th Forbidden Land, the divine demon sword had finally advanced into level 18. Ling Han immediately handed all the level 18 godly metal in his possession to be swallowed by the divine demon sword. But if he wanted to boost the divine demon sword up to level 19, the amount of level 18 godly metal would have to be multiplied by 100-fold, at the very least. This was completely impossible to do. Perhaps if he slowly searched for a few tens of thousands years in the ancient realm, he might be able to accomplish this mission. After clearing off all the old debts, Ling Han entered into the netherworld. He was going to bring the Overlord Sword Demon Master, the Hysteria Demon Master, Ouyang Taishan, and the others, and when the people from both sides were present, he was going to barge his way into the celestial realm. Chapter 1669. Breaking open the doors to the celestial realm. Ling Han entered into the netherworld from the nearest two-realm battlefield, and after calculating the galactic coordinates, he unfurled a golden path, heading towards Sea Space Planet. Coincidentally, he encountered an eternal river tier undergoing the heavenly tribulation on his way there. He immediately stepped on the brakes and halted, barging into the other's heavenly tribulation. That man was a young king tier, and had advanced into the pinnacle level of the eternal river tier after cultivating for only 1 million years, which could be considered very shocking. When he saw Ling Han barge in, his face involuntarily turned green in shock. What on earth is going on? I am undergoing a heavenly tribulation. What do you mean by barging in? Do you want to kill me? Otherwise, who would take the risk of being pulled into the heavenly tribulation and barge in? But I don't even know you. Senior. When he saw that Ling Han was stepping on a golden path, he realized that this was a demon master.
Whether he was a black demon or a heaven demon, he would be able to crush him easily with a single finger either way.
Ling Han grinned, and shot out a punch at the heavenly tribulation. Boom! What made him pleasantly surprised was the fact that the heavenly tribulation immediately reacted, forming new tribulation clouds. As expected, the two realms were separate, and even the wills of the heaven and earth were completely different. That eternal river tier almost bit his tongue. Was this senior an idiot? He took the initiative to trifle with the heavenly tribulation, and actually looked very pleased at that. Do you like to be struck by lightning so much? Even if you are a demon master, so what? You were strong, and the heavenly tribulation would only be even stronger. If you showed off too much, you would definitely be struck by lightning. But his face immediately twitched. He was so shocked that all the pores on his body were wide open. What had he seen? As multiple bolts of lightning took the form of giants, the aura that each of them exuded was strong enough to make him go into a breakdown, and their number was hair-raising. It was not just one or two, but rather millions and millions of them, and that number was even increasing endlessly. Could any human undergo such a heavenly tribulation? Ling Han gave a battle cry, and charged into the tribulation clouds. Pang, 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 he crushed everything in his way, shattering one giant after another as he went. Fuck! That eternal river tier directly shouted what he thought. Because he was too stunned, he completely forgot that he was undergoing a heavenly tribulation, and was instantly struck by a lightning bolt, which caused him severe injury. Ling Han was invincible everywhere he went. He had merged the regulations of the two realms to reach this kind of cultivation level, and whether it was the netherworld or the immortal realm, his battle prowess did not decrease the slightest. He charged into the depths of the tribulation clouds, and easily obtained the heavenly tribulation fluid. Though I haven't drunk it, I am sure that this is slightly different than what I got in the immortal realm. The moment the heavenly tribulation fluid was taken, the tribulation clouds immediately dispersed. Ling Han stood proudly in the galaxy, and when he saw that the eternal river tier previously was in a critical situation, he lent him a helping hand, taking over for him for his heavenly tribulation, and once again charged into the tribulation clouds. In merely a short while, the heavenly tribulation dispersed once more. Thank you, Senior, for your help. That eternal river tier had been scared silly, thanking Ling Han with a trembling voice, though it was also because he had been stunned by Ling Han that he suffered a severe injury. It would take more than half a year to reach Sea Space Planet from here, and Ling Han actually encountered two other people undergoing their heavenly tribulation on his way, which naturally allowed him to freeload off their heavenly tribulation another 2 times, giving him an additional 4 portions of heavenly tribulation fluid. Half a year later, Sea Space Planet appeared in front of him again. Wang, the golden path spread over,
and the Hysteria Demon Master immediately came out to receive him. He looked like he was completely guarded, right until he could see that the visitor was Ling Han. He was so stunned and gaped so widely that he could fit 2 eggs in his open mouth. Demon Master. Not only was he a demon master, he was an earth demon at that. This was too inconceivable. Over a dozen years ago, when Ling Han left, he was only in the Eternal River tier. Ling Han laughed loudly, and reminisced with the Hysteria Demon Master, as well as explained the purpose of his visit. After that, he went to Cold Cloud's planet to inform the Overlord Sword Demon Master. He stayed here for a very short time, fearing that he would meet Zhu Xian, that infatuated girl. Finally, Ling Han informed Ouyang Taishan, telling him that he could bring people to gather here. He waited for 2 years' time, and everyone finally gathered on Sea Space Planet. The Overlord Sword Demon Master, the Hysteria Demon Master, and Ouyang Taishan brought all the people that they should bring through their respective spatial god tools, and set out with Ling Han. They entered into the Immortal Realm through the 2-realm passageway, and also came to the Great River Mystery Realm. This return trip took another 3 years' time. In this time, Ling Han had also obtained 20 portions of heavenly tribulation fluid in the netherworld, but this was the limit. After that, the heaven and earth of the netherworld behaved like the heaven and earth of the immortal realm. Once he interfered, the heavenly tribulation would immediately dissipate, not giving him another chance to obtain the heavenly tribulation fluid anymore. This naturally caused the 3 demon masters' faces to twitch, their eyes almost popping out in shock. This should be about it. I'll give everyone 1 more month, and after that, we enter into the celestial realm. Ling Han gathered the masses, and announced the time for entering into the celestial realm. Those of the Forbidden Lands were both excited and terrified. They were finally able to return to their true homeland, but they were the ones that had been expelled in the past, and now that they returned once more to the celestial realm, would they be targeted? The young king tiers like Zi Chenfeng and the second in the world were filled with blazing fighting spirit. They could become leaders in the immortal realm, and were confident that they would also stay ahead of the masses even in the celestial realm. All of them could barely wait. The large black dog, the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire, the rabbit, and the old ginseng also returned. The rock golem chased after Ling Han all day like a dog. Little Qing, meanwhile, was very proud, and crouched behind Ling Han. Occasionally, she would stretch out her wings and peck him, astonishingly elegant. These guys had all been nurtured with Ling Han's full effort. They had even consumed saintly medicine before. Ling Han gave that natural psychic fruit to the Empress. He was sure that he could also advance rapidly even in the celestial realm, and did not need to depend on such celestial medicine to increase his cultivation level if it would actually increase his power directly. Ling Han would not be reserved. A month later, the time to enter into the celestial realm had finally arrived. Everyone had long since entered into the spatial god tools. All the saints and demon masters had also entered themselves when they handed the spatial god tools over to Ling Han. Though Ling Han and the Empress were presently able to break open the doors to the celestial realm, they worried that if the 2 of them opened the doorway at the same time, they would enter from 2 completely different places. Thus, the Empress also handed this honor over to Ling Han, while she herself entered into the Black Tower. And now, Ling Han was the only person left. At present, he had already arrived at a dark, cold area of the universe. He inhaled softly. After entering into the celestial realm, he would be able to see his parents, son, Hunyo, and the others. He had suppressed this thought at the bottom of his heart, yet now it was completely unleashed, and this desire became incredibly powerful. I am coming. He laughed loudly, gathered his full strength, and began to tear a rip into space. The regulations of the 2 realms collided. He used his full effort, and suddenly multiple layers of space broke apart, revealing a dark, quiet cave entrance. Ling Han did not enter. The doors that connected to the celestial realm were not opened yet. If he barged in right now, he would only be stuck in an endless empty void. He continued the struggle, and after throwing over 1,000 punches, with sword chi slashing out endlessly, this cave entrance became wider and considerably deeper, and there was an obscure light that was gradually appearing. Like a mirror, he could see that another realm was appearing at the other end of the cave. The celestial realm was gradually becoming clearer in front of Ling Han's eyes.
Chapter 1670. First arrived at the celestial realm. Ling Han did not hesitate any further, and entered with a single step. When he arrived in front of that mirror, he delivered the final strike. Crack! A crisp sound rang out, echoing through the whole heaven and earth, and alerting both the immortal realm and netherworld. This was the barrier between the ancient realm and the celestial realm. Only a great saint that had merged the regulations of both realms could manage to break through this barrier, and now it had shattered. The great doors to the celestial realm had officially opened. Boom! Endless spiritual chi surged over, and that hole that he had pierced open was currently closing back up behind Ling Han. The heaven and earth had their own instinctive recovery ability, its speed astonishingly quick, approaching Ling Han swiftly, as well as stopping this large volume of spiritual chi from entering into the immortal realm. Ling Han's figure flashed, and shot towards the celestial realm. Behind him, that passageway was swiftly closing up. He flew rapidly, and suddenly appeared in the air. Behind him, a black hole opened up for a moment, and quickly closed off. Ling Han stood in the air, while there was an indescribably expansive forest beneath him. Every tree was thousands of meters tall, and had leaves that were even larger than houses. Some had even bore fruit, which were incredibly and extraordinarily massive. The spiritual chi here was too plentiful, a good many times denser than even in the Great River Mystery Realm. Ling Han had just swept an eye over, and had already found at least 17 godly medicines that were above level 10, and the highest grade even reached up to level 15. But the scale over which his divine sense could spread over had also been greatly limited. Additionally, the height at which he could fly was also limited. The celestial realm was different from the ancient realm. This place was very big, and a city here was like a great star. However, the whole celestial realm was an integral whole, and was only separated by an ocean into two mainlands, which were called the Eastern Celestial Realm and the Western Celestial Realm. There were also a few random small islands in the ocean. Of course, they were small only in relative terms to the two mainlands. In truth, any of the islands was shockingly as huge as a whole galaxy of the ancient realm. According to the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, the ocean was very dangerous. In a moment of carelessness, one could easily encounter a severing mundane tier, dividing soul tier, or even immortal palace tier and ascending origin tier level immortal beasts. If they were the hot-tempered type, they would easily destroy the sea vessel along with everyone on board with a single move. Thus, crossing the ocean was a very risky matter. Ordinarily, only very large forces would establish marine routes, and charge their passengers an exorbitant fee. Flying across the ocean? That would only be delusional because the altitude that one could fly at was limited, and if they encountered powerful immortal beasts, the latter could easily swallow any person who was flying just by opening their mouths, which was similarly dangerous. Thankfully, Ling Han presently did not need to consider the problem of crossing the ocean. He did not even know where the Rock Palace was. The first step was to find his footing here. Ling Han released the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, the large black dog, and the Empress from the Spatial God Tools and Black Tower, respectively. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had been an immortal palace tier elite in the first place, and the large black dog was also linked in countless ways with the celestial realm. "I've finally returned!" the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire exclaimed ruefully. He had also become a young man in his 20s by now, and finally did not look so awkward. "Where is this place?" Ling Han asked. "With how big the celestial realm is, how should I know?" The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire rolled his eyes at him. "Putting me aside, even a great many celestial kings might not have traveled through every corner of the celestial realm. What more when there are a great many restricted areas that not even celestial kings may dare enter?" Ling Han sighed and replied, "If you don't know, just be frank about it. You don't have to come up with so many excuses." "That's right." The large black dog hit him while he was down. "Youngster, don't pretend you know if you're ignorant." The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire humphed. As his new body grew up, he had also become considerably more mature, no longer getting into a fight with the large black dog at the slightest provocation. "Let's go find a city first. We should not linger in this kind of primitive forest. With our present strength, we would be dead if we encountered any immortal beast. We would not even be able to flee. Additionally, we should not fly in the skies. That would make ourselves too big a target.
Ling Han, the Empress, and the others all descended as he said. In this place, it was clear that the heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had the greatest right of speech. As for the large black dog, could his words be believed? In this kind of dense forest, Ling Han and his group were incredibly minuscule. Any single leaf that fell would be a great many times bigger than them. However, it was not every demonic beast in the celestial realm that was incredibly powerful. Ling Han also saw ordinary ants. Of course, they were considerably bigger than normal, and possessed strength at least on the level of spiritual ocean tier. In the celestial realm, this was what ordinary was like. According to the heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, most people would be in the shattering void tier upon birth, and the stronger their parents, the higher the starting point for the child that would be born out of such a union. It was rumored that the son of a celestial king could even be in the severing mundane tier upon birth. But any force that had the slightest bit of strength would disperse the infant's cultivation level before the child had been born, converting it into natural fertilizer to improve their natural talent. In the celestial realm, it was relatively very simple to cultivate to the Genesis tier, but it would be too difficult to further improve one's natural talent after that.
Thus, this was a wise choice. Furthermore, this was not something that could be easily done, either.
The clan had to have an ancestor that was at least in the severing mundane tier to be able to cast this kind of secret technique.
Don't think that severing mundane ancestors were cheap in the celestial realm.
It was exactly the opposite. As long as one had advanced into the severing mundane tier, they would be greatly valued by any force. However, since they had obtained an endless lifespan, what severing mundane ancestor would be willing to live relying on someone else's charity? In the celestial realm, the unit of measure for forces would be cities. A celestial king-level force could even possess cities that numbered in the hundreds of millions, and every city was comparable to a great star, which showed how strong a force was. Even the smallest one-star city would have a severing mundane tier overseer. Otherwise, it could not be called a city, and could only be called a gathering spot. Ling Han's group traveled in the forest. They did not have any goal, and were only heading in a fixed direction. In the celestial realm, there was no difference between day and night. Though there were also stars scattered across the skies, they were like small worlds, and were not real stars but rather massive asteroids. From a certain aspect, this was not much different from a small world, though the space was larger, and the regulations were of an even higher level.
Thus, they could only use the time that had passed to calculate how many days had passed. After about 10 days, they had finally walked out of this massive forest.
A large river appeared ahead of them. It was incredibly wide as 1,000 miles, and meandered for very far, without any end in sight. There's a ship. And behind them, there was presently a large ship that was riding the waves. This ship was astonishingly huge, as long as 3,000 meters and just as wide. But traveling in this great river, it did not look remarkable at all, and would not have any difficulty in turning because of its humongous size, either.
It was moving at a very rapid speed, and soon surpassed them, heading forwards. In the celestial realm, the limits of speed had been released. Even a ship could match the speed of Ling Han running at full speed. Now it's easy. We can just follow the river, and we will definitely find a city on the way, the heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said. They would not be able to board this passing ship, but at least they knew that they would definitely come across a city as long as they followed the river course, which also set their minds at ease. However, they might come across a city even faster if they were to go in the opposite direction. They gave it some thought, but still decided to head forwards. Another month later, they finally saw a large city appear before them. It was so big that its boundaries could not be seen. They could only see that this great river was on the left side of the city, and there were at least a few hundred ships that were docked there. Chapter 1671. It's really so coincidental. That was a waterway. They could not enter into the city through here. The Empress wore a face veil. She was too beautiful, and with their present strength, they were still too weak in the celestial realm. If she became targeted by a profligate young master of any clan, there would be great trouble. Of course, they should avoid using the Black Tower as much as possible. This was the celestial realm. Perhaps severing mundane tiers or dividing soul tiers could see through the secret of the Black Tower. They circled around the city for at least half a day, and only then did they find a main road which led to the city. This was really a major route, being indescribably wide.
Really, it was not inferior to that great river at all, and extended to the city.
They could see that the city gateway was also similarly wide. Was this really a gateway into the city? It was practically an insurmountable barrier.
However, the city gates were presently closed, while there was a small door that was open at its side which was guarded by soldiers. Even if it was a small door, it was about 300 meters wide and 3,000 meters tall, and looked incredibly majestic and grand. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire gestured for them to stop, and said, "If we want to enter into the city, we have to pay a fee, ordinarily star stones which are refined from those asteroids in the skies that have fallen. They contain the great Tao of the heaven and earth. Otherwise, we can only use saintly medicine." Ling Han and the Empress exchanged a look, both feeling rueful. Entry into the city required a fee of saintly medicine. This was practically daylight robbery. Spatial god tools are too common here. It would not deceive anyone if we were to hide them, and if we bring them into the city like that, it would be seen as deliberately breaching the city laws. By then, there would definitely be elites mobilized to suppress us, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said. Ling Han nodded. Then we can only release the others somewhere nearby. They retreated more than 10,000 miles away. Because it was near the city, there weren't any overly fierce demonic beasts, and immortal beasts were even more impossible. The Blue Feather Saint, Ouyang Taishan, Star Sand Saint, and the others all appeared. Ling Han explained the circumstances to them, and the saints all nodded. This was the celestial realm, where spiritual qi was not only denser, the regulations of the two realms were also complete. As long as there was enough time, these saints would have hopes of becoming severing mundane ancestors. They were able to cultivate to the saint tier in the ancient realm, which proved that all of them were extraordinarily gifted, so there was definitely hope for them to advance into the severing mundane tier. They would stay here first whilst looking for saintly medicine nearby, and gradually send their people into the city in future. Ling Han was already extremely benevolent to have brought them here. With the warning of the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, everyone prepared the same statement. They were all natives of the celestial realm, and had been living in the celestial realm since childhood. They did not have any relation to the ancient realm at all. Otherwise, if the secret was leaked out, they would all be hunted down and executed. Hence, the first thing on the agenda was to merge the regulations of the two realms. If they were unable to do this, they would not need to enter into the city. If they were discovered, it would be equivalent to confessing that they had come from the ancient realm. After they were settled, Ling Han and his group entered the city. Ling Han could still afford 4 saintly medicines. If it was not for the fact that the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire and the large black dog did not know of the existence of the Black Tower, Ling Han really wanted to draw the Empress into the Black Tower as well. In that manner, he would have been able to save 1 saintly medicine. Halt! When they arrived at the small city gateway, they were stopped by 2 guards. These 2 were actually Eternal River tier elites. There were a total of 16 guards, and all of them were in this cultivation level, showing how high the overall level of cultivation of the celestial realm was. However, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire immediately curled his lip, and communicated a message through divine sense. This should be a 1-star city, or a 2-star city at most. Otherwise, it would be absolutely impossible for only a few Eternal River tiers to be guarding the gates. He added further that if it was a 5-star city which had a celestial king overseer, though the guards were only Genesis tiers, there would definitely be 1 or 2 severing mundane tier inspectors in the vicinity. Entrance fee. One of the guards stretched out his hand. Ling Han bore with the heartache. Usually, it was only he who would be robbing others, yet now he had to bear with being robbed, which depressed him greatly. He handed over 4 saintly medicines. Thankfully, they were only level 17, which could be considered some comfort. Go in then. That guard waved them off. When they passed through the city gates, a ray of light shot down and swept over their bodies. This was to inspect for any spatial god tools. It was not only to prevent the emergence of stowaways. If any opposing force snuck in a large number of elites via a spatial god tool, and suddenly attacked from within, that would become a huge problem. After the 4 of them entered into the city, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire immediately planned to make himself scarce. Brat. Then we will go our separate ways from now on. I want to go and concentrate on cultivation, make a comeback, and then kill all those bastards that had hunted me.
He left confidently after saying these words. Then Grandpa Dog is also going to go free. But don't worry, little Han.
I have already remembered your scent, and even if you die and are buried in a grave, I will still be able to find you.
The large black dog's words were much more annoying.
Just get lost.
Ling Han shot out a foot, and the large black dog immediately raced off with his rear swaying behind him, incredibly showy. It was good that they had left. Now it was just him and the Empress left. Of course, there was still a large group of people in the Black Tower. This was called a city, but its size was comparable to a planet. Thus, there were tall mountains that were enshrouded in clouds, ceaselessly surging rivers, blazing deserts, and icy plains here. All kinds of environments existed here.
There were innumerable passers-by on the streets, and not one of them cast a second glance on Ling Han and the Empress.
Ling Han suddenly had the misconception that they were already citizens of the celestial realm. He walked slowly with the Empress whilst listening in on the conversations of the passers-by. This was their first time here, and neither of them had any experience with this realm, so they naturally had to make more observations and speak less. Actually, the people of the celestial realm were not much different. Aside from the fact that the overall level of cultivation was higher, being here did not make them feel like they were in a different place from the ancient realm. Ling Han and the Empress listened in on the discussions of others on the way, and the most common topic of conversation was that the Dark Blue Moon Army was presently recruiting in preparation for military service. Ling Han's expression involuntarily became strange. Dark Moon Army? Could it be that this was Dark Moon City? The Dark Moon City, the Ding clan that Ding Zizhen and Ding Yaolong belonged to? It couldn't be so coincidental, right? Yet it was really so coincidental. There were a total of 3 great severing mundane tier forces in Dark Moon City, and the Ding clan was precisely one of them. However, though the Dark Moon Army was under the unified administration of these 3 great severing mundane tier forces, the true ownership of it did not belong to these 3 great forces. Why? In the celestial realm, all smaller forces needed to find a backer. Severing mundane tiers would look for dividing soul tiers, while dividing soul tiers would seek immortal palace tiers, and when one had reached immortal palace tier, they would be able to establish their own rule in the celestial realm, and did not need to look for other backers at all. Of course, if they wanted to, they could. For example, under the barrier of celestial king tier forces, there would definitely be ascending origin tier and immortal palace tier elites. Dark Moon City was a 1-star city, belonging to the lowest rank. Their backer was a dividing soul tier force, Black Moon Sect. The Black Moon Sect's backer was the Fu clan. Thus, this Dark Moon Army theoretically belonged to the Fu clan. However, there were thousands of cities under the rule of the Fu clan, so they naturally would not supervise all matters, regardless of their importance. Hence, the Dark Moon Army was still controlled by the 3 great clans in reality.
However, after joining the Dark Moon Army, as long as one showed outstanding performance, he would have a chance of being promoted and joining the army of a 4-star great city, and if that was continued by further stunning performance, he would be able to enter into a 3-star great city and enter into the line of sight of the Fu clan.
In the celestial realm, becoming a severing mundane ancestor would mean an endless lifespan, but why were there so few dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier elites? Firstly, high-grade celestial techniques were rare, and secondly, it was the problem of resources. This was not a problem that could be solved through simply living a few more billion years. Hence, if one could join a great sect or great clan, that was the fastest shortcut for lower-class cultivators to rise above the rest. And there was such an opportunity in front of them now. The Dark Moon Army was recruiting reserve troops. There would only be such a chance every 100 years, and if they missed it, they would have to wait another 100 years. Ling Han looked at the Empress, and the Empress nodded. They needed a chance to integrate themselves into the celestial realm, and this Dark Moon Army was their best option. Chapter 1672. Enlisting. Ling Han and the Empress journeyed towards the western part of Dark Moon City. This city was too colossal, being comparable to a great star. They could claim to have traveled over land and water, and only arrive at their destination a day later. This was a range of hills, and an empty space had been cleared at the base.
They could clearly feel that there was a protective formation, and the might that it unleashed should be capable of insta-killing Genesis tiers, reaching the level of the severing mundane tier.
There were a great many people here. Clearly, Joining the Dark Moon Army was a wonderful opportunity for one to excel, and anyone with the slightest bit of ambition would not want to miss it. Thus, there were crowds of people, and they could see people in all directions they looked. It was not just limited to pure humans, either. There were also half-humans, and they occupied a great proportion of the crowd. Among the many races, the human race had the highest tolerance level, so even if a great many humans looked purely human, there was actually the bloodline of demonic beasts flowing in their bodies. There was a very long line at the registration area, and Ling Han and the Empress also lined up obediently behind the masses. In the ancient realm, they were already strong enough to conquer all opposition, but in this place, Genesis tier was really not enough. As they lined up, the two of them also listened to the idle conversations of others to increase their knowledge of the celestial realm. However, the most common topic was the recruitment. This time, the Dark Moon Army would recruit a total of 1,000 people to become their reserve troops. These 1,000 people would be divided into 10 teams, with 100 per team. Then, in the next 90 years from now onwards, one person would be knocked out every single year. Finally, every team would be left with 10 people, totaling up to 100 people who would truly become members of the Dark Moon Army to replenish the wear and tear of the Dark Moon Army. The Celestial Realm was a place that was filled with battles. Though the Dark Moon City had a backer, and it was rare for large-scale battles to take place, this was not a lone city. It needed to do business with other cities, and this concerned the problem of transport. Between any two cities, there would definitely be mountain bandits, and the task of the Dark Moon Army was to regularly purge some mountain bandits. Otherwise, if the bandits were too rampant, not only would it affect the reputation of the Dark Moon City, it would also damage their direct profits. However, those that would become mountain bandits were basically below the Severing Mundane tier, and the Severing Mundane ancestors of the Dark Moon City were too lazy to even bother wasting time to search for these mountain bandits because they were like weeds. If one batch was eliminated, a new one would pop up. There would always be people taking risks and wanting to reap profits without working for it. Hence, the task of suppressing the thieves was handed over to the Dark Moon Army. Sometimes, they would also be hired by traveling merchants as protection, and earn some extra income on the side. All things considered, after one joined the Dark Moon Army, he would be able to obtain a regular amount of cultivation resources, and those that accomplished military merits would even get celestial techniques. Sometimes they would also have extra gains. Aside from the fact that it was more dangerous, it really did not have any disadvantages. Added with the fact that one could also be promoted and finally enter into the Fu clan, the masses would naturally scramble for the opportunity. The progress of the troop was very slow. A few hours had passed, and Ling Han and the Empress had only advanced half the way forwards. Because the two of them had come very late, they were the final two, and there was no one else lining up behind them. It was at this moment that a young man flew over from the distance, ADN directly charged to the registration area. He was clearly cutting the line here, but the people at the registration area actually did not chase him off, but rather helped him register politely. This incited fury from the crowd, and a great many people jumped up. What gives him the right? That's right. We are all honestly lining up here. Why is he allowed to cut in? This is unjust. However, someone immediately poured cold water on them, and asked, "You guys don't even know who that is?" Who? That person shook his head, looking at them like they were idiots. That is a prodigy of the younger generation of the Ding clan, Ding Xiaofan. This whole Dark Moon Army is theirs. So what if he cut into the line? With these words, everyone lost their anger, but there was also someone mumbling under their breath. This is not the Ding clans, it belongs to the Fu clan. Even if it was not the Fu clan, there is still the Black Moon sect, and there are also two other great clans. Ding Xiaofan is a prodigy with astonishing natural talent in cultivation. It is said that he has formed over 600 million stars when he was in the Eternal River tier, and now that he is a Saint King, who could be a match for him among his peers? Sigh, I initially had thought of aiming for the position of team captain, but from the look of things now, the pressure has increased considerably. There is one less position available out of the 10 positions. Strange. Ding Xiaofan still needs to join the Dark Moon Army to earn military credits? What cultivation resources would he even lack? Ho ho, perhaps he has come here to show off. Wrong. A person wagged his finger, pretending to be mysterious. Seeing the people around him look in his direction, he smiled proudly, and said, "That is because there is another person that would be coming here today, and Ding Xiaochen has come for that person. Who is it? Everyone pressed the question.
You guys will know later, the person answered, feigning mysteriousness.
At this time, a commotion was suddenly heard from ahead of them. What is it? Those behind were not clear about the situation, and did not dare extend their divine sense to find out, either. There was a severing mundane tier elite overseeing things here. Who would dare release their divine sense in front of such an elite and challenge his authority? Ding Xiaochen actually has 3-star aptitude. Very quickly, someone who was in front informed them of the situation. What? Everyone was shocked.
In the celestial realm, there was a different kind of method to estimate the natural talent of cultivators. Basically, it was to calculate the tier-surpassing battle prowess of a cultivator, but there was also potential of growth and so on, which was not completely identical with the ancient realm.
Ordinarily, 1-star aptitude would be worthy of nurturing, 2-star aptitude could be considered a prodigy, and 3 stars would be a prodigy among prodigies. As expected of a young king tier from the Ding clan, this was too amazing. So this is a disciple that has been nurtured by the 3 great clans? Someone asked softly with a trembling voice. Before this, there were indeed a few top talents, but they only had 2-star aptitude. Most people would only have 1-star aptitude. Everyone shook their heads. This gap was really too wide. So wide that they did not even have the heart to feel envious. They could only admire such talent from afar. It was at this moment that another figure shot over from the distance. Dressed in dazzlingly crimson robes, it was a young girl as beautiful as a fairy, a lovely young woman with a snow-white complexion, while her hair was as black as ink, forming a powerful juxtaposition. She looked extremely enchanting. That is Mao Shuyu, the only daughter of Great Commander Mao Dai of the Dark Moon Army. Hiss, Great Commander Mao Dai? That is a 3rd Severance Grand Elder. Lord Mao is a living legend. In the past, he came all alone to Dark Moon City. Who would have thought that he could have become a 3rd Severance Grand Elder in 3 eras? I get it. Ding Xiaochen has come for the sake of Mao Shuyu. Hee. Lord Mao is the only severing mundane tier in Dark Moon City that does not belong to any of the 3 great clans, and a 3rd Severance at that. With his freakish talent, becoming a 4th Severance consummate level would definitely be no issue. By then, it is highly possibly that he would be directly transferred over by the Fu clan, and a meteoric career success is just round the corner. Thus, the 3 great clans must all want to maintain good relations with him. Even if he continues to stay in Dark Moon City, a 3rd Severance Grand Elder is still a top-tier elite, and is worth them fighting over him at all costs. Furthermore, isn't marrying his daughter the least expensive and safest method? Sigh, if I could marry her, that'd be great. As everyone discussed spiritedly, the young woman in red did not take advantage of her superior status to cut into the line like Ding Xiaochen had. Instead, she obediently joined the end of the line, which just happened to be right behind Ling Han and the Empress. Chapter 1673. 3.5 stars aptitude. Ding Xiaochen immediately walked over from the front, his expression filled with arrogance, as if there was no one important enough to garner his attention. However, when he arrived in front of Mao Shuyu, he immediately cracked a smile and said, "Shuyu, why do you have to line up with these lowly commoners? Come, I will bring you to the front." Ding Xiaochen, who allowed you to directly address me by name? Mao Shuyu did not appreciate his offer at all. You can either call me Miss Mao or call me Mao Shuyu. Ding Xiaochen looked slightly embarrassed after getting the cold shoulder from her. His eyes swept over, and when he spotted Ling Han and the Empress, he involuntarily took out his anger on them and shouted, "What are you two looking at?" Ling Han was not the type that was willing to be bullied. He was just about to speak when he saw Mao Shuyu stretch out a hand in front of him. She asked, "What are you being so fierce to others for?" Ding Xiaochen's eyes were dark, and he glared fiercely at Ling Han because the Empress was a woman, after all. He smirked internally. When they went through the selection process, he would definitely target and kill this guy. He humphed and strode off. "This guy is very petty, and will definitely target the two of you," Mao Shuyu said to Ling Han and the Empress. "Don't worry. With me there, he will not dare do anything to the two of you." When the selection process begins later, the The two of you just stay beside me, and I will ensure your safety. She was really quite confident.
Ling Han involuntarily laughed and replied, "Then thank you."
He made his decision. Later, if he was to encounter Ding Xiaochen, he would definitely let him know the true depth of his abilities. The Empress, meanwhile, didn't even pay him any regard. Her life philosophy was very simple. If anything made her unhappy, just kill it. The line slowly advanced, and a few prodigies would occasionally appear, which would stun the masses.
However, in the celestial realm, this city was really too small.
It was really difficult for such freakish prodigies like Ling Han, the Empress, and the Rain Emperor to appear. Lastly, it was finally Ling Han and the Empress's turn, followed by Mao Shuyu, and there was no one else after. The Empress went first. This was the first test. According to the rules, only those who had reached the Eternal River tier would be qualified to register, while the highest limit was Genesis tier. Severing Mundane tier? If there were any Severing Mundane tiers that were willing to join the Dark Moon Army, then even Great Commander Mao Dai would gladly come out to receive them instead. What need was there for one to have to come here to register? The test was very simple. There was only a stone, but there was a formation inscribed on it. One only had to deliver a full power strike against it, and it would reflect the candidate's cultivation level and aptitude. The main deciding factor was battle prowess. Aside from that, the quality of their origin power and unique cultivation techniques would also be recorded by the formation, analyzed, integrated, and graded. This could be considered to be quite accurate. The Empress stretched out a slender hand as fair as snow, her fingers long and slender like spring onions.
Even if she had concealed her appearance and changed into loose robes, hiding her perfect figure, a great many people were still besotted when they saw her unadorned hand. This was a great beauty and bewitching demoness that could conquer the whole world with her charms. Under the attention of innumerable pairs of eyes, the Empress pressed lightly on the testing stone.
Suddenly, the testing stone released a white halo, which swiftly disappeared. Soon after, a slim line appeared on the left and right of the testing stone. That was two pillars of light, one red and the other purple. The red ray of light was only half as high as the purple one. High extreme of the Genesis tier, 2.5 stars aptitude. The examiner raised his head to look at the Empress, showing an expression of shock. This was an astonishing natural talent that was inferior only to Ding Xiaochen's. However, the Empress was not the only prodigy of this grade, but she definitely could be ranked among the top 10. This red line represented cultivation level, while the purple line represented aptitude, which was closely connected with battle prowess. If the purple line exceeded the red line, it meant that the candidate possessed tier-surpassing battle prowess, and the more it exceeded it, the higher his tier-surpassing battle prowess. Of course, the majority of people here had two lines of equal height, while a very small number of people had red lines that exceeded their purple lines. This would mean immediate elimination. The Dark Moon Army did not need trash, not even for their reserve troops. They would only show 2-star aptitude. This was the conclusion that Shi and Ling Han had come to after discussion. They did not want to attract too much attention. Their knowledge of the Celestial Realm and Dark Moon City was truly too limited. However, the Empress had not undergone such a test before, so in a moment of carelessness, her grade showed 2.5 stars. Passed. Your serial number is 5572. The examiner registered the Empress, and gave her a plaque. Without having been officially recruited, they would not even bother to record the actual names of the candidates. The Empress took the plaque, and still did not speak. She only stepped back a bit and waited for Ling Han. Ling Han smiled at Mao Shuyu and said, "Miss Mao, you can go first." As a man, he was still quite gentlemanly. He would just be the last to take his turn. Mao Shuyu did not refuse his kind offer, and walked forwards. After concentrating slightly, she struck a heavy blow on the testing stone. White light surged, and immediately disappeared. The red and purple line appeared once more. Consummate level of the Genesis tier, 3-star aptitude. The examiner exclaimed in shock. Finally, another super genius had appeared, not allowing Ding Xiaochen to be the only excellent one there. However, this was very normal. One was a prodigy from the Ding clan, while the other was the only daughter of the great commander. From birth,
They were already at a higher level than others, so wasn't it absolutely normal for them to be far ahead in the lead?
Miss Mao, your serial number is 5573. The examiner even stood up deliberately to hand over the plaque to Mao Shuyu. It couldn't be helped. Her old man was the superior of his superior. How could he not be extra polite? Mao Shuyu was very energetic. She was about to leave after taking the plaque, but she had just taken 2 steps when she stopped and turned to look at Ling Han. Clearly, Ling Han had allowed her to be tested first, so she, too, wanted to give Ling Han some face. At least, she would watch as he completed his test. Furthermore, she still remembered her promise to protect Ling Han and his companion. In the distance, Ding Xiaochen crossed his arms over his chest, a smug look on his face. At first, Ling Han had planned to keep a low profile, but when he saw this expression on Ding Xiaochen's face, he couldn't help but feel angered. He also looked back at Ding Xiaochen, and tapped a finger on the testing stone. Xiao, a flash of sword light swept out, and the testing stone suddenly surged with white light. Then, the red and purple lines appeared. High extreme of the Genesis tier, 3.5 stars aptitude. The examiner looked at the testing stone, bearing the expression of an idiot. Had this thing broken down? 3.5 stars? This had to be a joke. What? Ding Xiaochen, too, could no longer maintain his calm bearing. He immediately leaped over. He looked at the testing stone, his face slightly green. He had actually been surpassed by another. A 3.5 stars prodigy had actually appeared here. The last time a 3.5 stars prodigy appeared, it was still 3 years ago when Mao Dai showed his outstanding talent, and before that, it was the strongest prodigy of the Ding clan, Ding Yaolong. Such prodigies were all capable of becoming 4th Severance consummate level in the end, without exception. One era was 100 million years. There were really too many people with long lives in the celestial realm. The usual way of recording by years was too inconvenient, and additionally, one epoch would be 12 trillion years. There were not many elites that could live that long though, because there was still the immortals' tribulation. If one could not continue becoming stronger, there would ultimately come a day when even celestial kings would die. Once one had advanced into the severing mundane tier, one could gain an unlimited lifespan. But why was it that most elites had all ultimately died at the first severance because of their immortals' tribulation through these countless eras? It was too hard to break through. Everyone said that there were 9 levels for Celestial King tier, and reaching each level was as difficult as ascending the heavens. But how was it not the same for the Severing Mundane tier and Ascending Origin tier? The Severing Mundane tier meant striking oneself with the heavens will saber. If one was the slightest bit careless, what would be severed would not be one's mortal bonds, but his fruits of cultivation. Chapter 1674. Selection. Ordinarily, 1-star aptitude would have hope of becoming a 1st Severance Grand Elder, 2-star aptitude would become 2nd Severance, and 3.5 stars would be qualified to aim for 4th Severance. Of course, all of this was theory. However, there was one fact that could be confirmed.
3.5 stars aptitude might not be able to become 4th Severance, but those that could become 4th Severance would need to have at least 3.5 stars aptitude.
Gasp. Ding Xiaochen looked at Ling Han jealously. This was too inconceivable. A lowly commoner actually had 3.5 stars aptitude. Even he would only be able to become a 3rd Severance Grand Elder at most. Though aptitude was not unchangeable, if one had cultivated a different cultivation technique or consumed some super celestial medicine, it was completely possible that aptitude could be increased or decreased, but how could it possibly be changed without a unique opportunity? If he had known that Ling Han and the Empress had only taken the test very casually, and their true potential surpassed 3.5 stars, just what kind of expression would he have on his face? Passed. Your serial number is 5574. The examiner stood up again, and handed the plaque to Ling Han. Perhaps Ling Han would be another Mao Dai after many years, and become a new legend. What is your name, and where do you come from? Mao Shuyu's eyes shone as she looked Ling Han up and down. Ling Han smiled slightly, and replied, My name is Ling Han. I have just entered into Dark Moon City. Previously, I have been residing in a mountain forest, right until a beast stampede exploded not too long ago. Many of the residents of our village either died or moved elsewhere, so we came to Dark Moon City to seek refuge.
This was the explanation that he, the Empress, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, and the large black dog had agreed upon.
Ling Han. Ding Xiaochen also walked over. He looked down proudly on Ling Han. I will give you a wonderful opportunity to become my follower. Didn't think that this is an insult to you. In truth, who knows how many prodigies and elites want to become my followers, but were not given this chance at all. He naturally was not planning to support Ling Han, but simply wanted to have this super genius by his side so he could simply think of a method to get him killed in future. The top prodigy of Dark Moon City.
It was enough for him alone to bear such a title. There was no need for another to share the title for him. What more surpass him?
I am not interested. Ling Han naturally refused. Ding Xiaochen's expression darkened, and he threatened, Brat, don't be ungrateful. Ho ho. Ling Han was too lazy to even respond to him this time, and only laughed.
Ignore him.
Mao Shuyu scoffed and said, Ding Xiaochen, let me warn you not to mess around. I plan to introduce this person to Father, and see if he has any interest in taking a disciple.
If you have any ideas that you shouldn't have, then even if you are a member of the Ding clan, Father will still dare to behead you.
Ding Xiaochen's fingers involuntarily moved slightly. This was a sign that he was extremely furious. He stared at Ling Han for a while, a cold smirk appearing on his lips.
He was merely in the high extreme, so even if he had 3.5 stars aptitude, so what?
He had the advantage of more than a whole minor level. Wouldn't that be enough to compensate for that gap of half a star of aptitude? It was inevitable for the glint of cold steel to emerge in the subsequent selection. So what if he beat him to death then? Rules would be rules.
He did not speak further, but the killing intent in his eyes could not be any more obvious.
Ling Han was displeased internally, and thought that it would be great if he could also borrow the name of the Rock Palace. He could simply kill a hateful guy like this, and would not have to worry about retaliation from the force behind him. However, he had promised Hu Yu that he would raze the Ding clan to the ground. At first, he was not the type to bring disaster to others. No matter how notorious a clan was, there would still be a few good people and innocents among its members. Yet now his attitude became firm. Whether your Ding clan had any good people or not, he was determined to destroy it. Those who have received a place may advance and begin the next selection. A middle-aged man dressed in military attire appeared. He was a peak stage Saint King, and could be called a supreme elite in the ancient realm, yet was only an ordinary military officer here. And this was still because Dark Moon City was a 1-star city.
If this was a 2-star or 3-star city, he might only be able to become a foot soldier of the lowest rank.
More than 5,000 people walked forwards, and arrived at the foot of the mountains. The military officer took one step forwards and said, To those who have passed through the selection today, I will be your military instructor for the next 100 years. I do not care who you are. Now that you are here and have fallen under my supervision, you all are just soldiers, understand?
Understood.
More than 5,000 people all shouted loudly. Additionally, my name is Tu Kong. You all may address me as instructor too, the military officer continued. And now let me announce the rules of the selection. Setting out from here, you will have to climb 9 mountains. There are many blood shadow wolves there, and their strength ranges from the Eternal River tier to Genesis tier. What you all have to do is to bring the tail of a single blood shadow wolf back.
He paused and then repeated, Only the first 1,000 people that bring back the tail of a blood shadow wolf will be qualified to become reserve troops of the Dark Moon Army.
As for the others, I do not care what the reason is, all of you will be eliminated. In this period of time, all of you are responsible for your own lives. If you fear death, you can scram now. Actually, everyone knew these rules already. For some, this was not their first time undergoing this test, but there were some first-timers who were starting to hesitate. At first, they had thought that they could be fearless, but now that they had reached this step, they were still afraid. Over 300 people chose to give up, but those remaining still exceeded 5,000, so the elimination rate was going to be very high.
Then, set out.
Tu Kong snapped his fingers, and then sat down. Boom, more than 5,000 people immediately charged out. Strength was not the only factor in the selection. There was also the factor of luck. For example,
Though eternal river tears could not possibly be a match for Genesis tears, if they were lucky and encountered an eternal river tear blood shadow wolf, they would still have a chance of becoming one of the first 1,000 people.
Follow me.
Mao Shuyu was very trustworthy, and beckoned Ling Han and the Empress over. Ling Han and the Empress didn't mind, and followed her. The three of them used their respective movement techniques, and traversed through the mountain forests. In the ancient realm, the speed of saints was about the same aside from those Genesis tears that focused on cultivating regulations of time, who could have an advantage in speed. However, in the celestial realm, the speed of Genesis tears varied. That was because the regulations of the celestial realm were more complete, and the structure of the heaven and earth here was incredibly sturdy. If one wanted to possess high speed, he would have to overcome various obstacles, and this led to the speed of Genesis tears varying. Saint Kings were definitely faster than Great Saints, and Great Saints were definitely faster than Medium Saints. Of course, this did not apply to two such freaks like Ling Han and the Empress. Mao Shuyu did not know this fact, so she took the initiative to slow down. She was worried that if she went full speed ahead, Ling Han and the Empress would lose track of her. However, this kind of speed was already fast enough. After all, there were only over 300 Saint Kings that participated this time round. In the selection round, 1,000 candidates was enough. Those who performed better would just have to stand up earlier in the battle for the position of team captain, and this did not matter at all to her. With enough strength, what did she have to fear? Ding Xiaofan, meanwhile, followed behind them, looking like an eagle that was hunting its prey. Once Mao Shuyu had the slightest moment of carelessness, he would release a swift strike and deal with Ling Han. Chapter 1675. Revered by the Wolf Pack. More than 5,000 people diving into the mountain forest was akin to pouring a bucket of water into the ocean, completely negligible. What more when every single person still had to keep their guard up around others, so they naturally wanted nothing more than for other people to be as far away from them as possible. Soon, Ding Xiaofan was the only person left behind Ling Han and his group, but after a while, this guy also disappeared without a trace. Clearly, he had definitely not given up, but was rather lying in ambush secretly, wanting to grasp an opening for a sneak attack. Ling Han grinned and asked, "Can we run faster?" Mao Shuyu was surprised. In her eyes, this was already the maximum speed a great saint could reach. She had even wanted to ask Ling Han and her companion if they should go slower. After all, even great saints could not possibly maintain this kind of maximum speed constantly. Yet Ling Han actually asked her if they could go faster. Was he being boastful? Mao Shuyu was not a gentle princess. Her personality was a fiery one. She did not say a word, but her speed increased slightly. After a while of running, she turned around, wanting to see where Ling Han and his companion had fallen behind. But she got a shock when she turned her head because Ling Han and the Empress were both closely following behind her, only about 9 meters away. To this. Mao Shuyu was really shocked. Though she knew that these two had extraordinary aptitude, one having 2.5 stars, and the other having 3.5, there was still a gap of more than a whole minor level. How could these two possibly manage to follow her? Are you both monsters? She was dissatisfied, and slowly increased her speed further, but she astonishingly discovered that Ling Han and the Empress were both following her with ease, still maintaining the gap of 9 meters, which did not increase or decrease. Where are your limits? Mao Shuyu finally gave her full effort, and increased her speed to the maximum. Suddenly, it was as if she had turned into a gale. However, she soon discovered that she was still unable to throw Ling Han and the Empress off her tail. No, she was even unable to force the two of them to show the maximum level of their speed, because the two of them were still maintaining a distance of 9 meters from her, but who could really say that this was their fastest speed? Actually, Mao Shuyu could still increase her speed slightly, but that was with a secret technique, and she could only use it for a temporary burst of speed, which would be meaningless. Xiao. The three of them sped quickly. Behind them, Ding Xiaofan was running madly, but the distance between him and Ling Han's group was gradually widening, and he had finally completely lost track of all three of them. Even in Dark Moon City, it was not peaceful everywhere. There were some demonic beasts that had violent nature here. They clearly had gained intelligence, yet still had a fondness for devouring cultivators. Thus, they naturally were excluded from the cultivation civilization, and were on the opposing side of cultivators.
These violent and bloodthirsty demonic beasts lived in such tall mountains, and were not completely exterminated, because they could be used to test cultivators, such as presently. Occasionally, birds would be scared into flight out of the forest, and cries would ring out.
Sometimes it would be a cultivator being killed, and sometimes it would be the demonic beast that would have the tables turned on it, being killed instead.
For enemies to meet on a narrow path, it was naturally the stronger side who would emerge victorious. Though they only had to run over 9 mountains, the terrain inside the mountain forest was complex, and it was very unsuitable for full-speed running. The Wolf King and Guard Wolves would definitely be at the peak of the consummate level of the Genesis tier, and the Wolf King would be an astonishing big shot, and can be claimed to be a big shot among Genesis tiers, Mao Shuyu explained to Ling Han and the Empress. Ling Han and the Empress nodded their heads. Though they did not take these wolves seriously, they did not mind listening to her explanation. Anyways, we can complete our mission as long as we have the tail of a blood shadow wolf. There is no need for us to charge into a wolf's den. We only have to find one that is all alone, Mao Shuyu continued.
Fine then.
Ling Han nodded with a smile. However, their luck was very bad. Though they soon discovered a wolf's den, there were as many as 100 members in this wolf pack, with no less than 30 at the consummate level of the Genesis tier, and the Wolf King was even more frightening. Ling Han was absolutely sure that even the Blue Feather Saint King and Ouyang Taishan could not possibly be a match for this Wolf King. Firstly, it was because of the regulations, and secondly, this Wolf King indeed had very strong battle prowess, suppressing all other demon wolves. We'll wait here, and there would definitely be a blood shadow wolf that falls behind the pack. Even someone with a personality like Mao Shuyu's did not dare carelessly provoke these blood shadow wolves. Ling Han's eyes swept over, and his eyes involuntarily lit up as he exclaimed, "Wife, look!" He pointed at the wolves' den. They called it a wolves' den, and it was actually very simple. A large boulder protruded, forming a sheltered space. The Wolf King crouched high above on the massive boulder, its fur crimson, and appeared to be incredibly majestic. Behind it, there were 8 similarly fierce-looking giant wolves that were sitting like it was, and the other blood shadow wolves were under the large boulder. Some were sprawled out asleep, and some were playing with each other. In the deepest part underneath the large boulder, there was a plant that was thriving with growth, and they could smell its refreshing fragrance even from this distance of about a mile away. Saintly medicine. The Empress's eyes lit up. Ling Han nodded and said, "It should be a great saint-tier medicine, Buddha heart fungus." "The two of you should not be reckless," Mao Shuyu hurriedly advised them. "A saintly medicine may be good, but one should act according to one's means. If we became targeted by these blood shadow wolves, we would only be able to flee. It would not be difficult to stay alive, but if they were to be pursued by the wolf pack, how were they supposed to pass through the selection?" She had just finished her words when she saw the Empress had already stood up, and was walking towards the wolf pack. Mao Shuyu paled in shock, and hurriedly planned to stop the Empress, but she was instead stopped by Ling Han. "It's fine, just let her go," Ling Han said. Mao Shuyu immediately glared angrily at Ling Han. "How could you be so heartless? That woman is clearly your wife, but you would actually watch helplessly as she jumps into danger just for the sake of a saintly medicine? You are practically scum." Flames of fury blazed in her heart, and she secretly decided to keep her distance from Ling Han in future. Merely the sight of this kind of scum made her feel disgusted. But she was completely dumbfounded with shock and stupefied when she saw the subsequent scene. The Empress had already arrived, but not only did the wolf pack not attack her, they all crouched down instead, as if they were expressing their reverence towards the Empress. "This." Mao Shuyu rubbed her eyes, but the scene in front of her did not change in the slightest. "Why?" Her heart was filled with confusion, watching dumbly as the Empress plucked the saintly medicine, and severed the tails of 3 blood shadow wolves. Though those 3 blood shadow wolves cried out in pain, they did not become hostile, but rather lowered their posture even further. The Empress turned around, taking dainty steps, her bearing graceful. Even Mao Shuyu could not help but feel her heart throb wildly despite the fact that she was a woman herself. However, Ling Han was very clear. Both he and the Empress had formed 10 million stars before they had broken through to the Genesis tier, and their battle prowess overwhelmed all other Genesis tiers.
This was something that could not be sensed by fellow cultivators, but was discovered by the blood shadow wolves that only knew bloodshed and slaughter. They were bloodthirsty, and they also revered power. The Empress was a king among kings, and even the Wolf King was as docile as a dog. On the other hand, even if a severing mundane tier elite had come, these blood shadow wolves would still battle to the death. Because what they revered was a true king tier.
Chapter 1676. Competing for position of captain. Prodigy, king tier. These two terms were frequently misused.
If anyone's performance was the slightest bit outstanding, he would be crowned with the title of prodigy, and if he was the slightest bit more prodigious, he would be a top prodigy, a super genius.
In truth, there was only one kind of person that could be termed a king tier.
The grading criteria for the severing mundane tier, immortal palace tier, and the like was still unclear, but at least below celestial level, only those who had cultivated to the true pinnacle of the eternal river tier were worthy of the title of king tier. There were really too few of such king tiers, and even in top sects, only the saints could reach such a level, and in the case of other forces, they would only be able to obtain one such prodigy in a rare stroke of great fortune.
The Empress walked back, and showed Ling Han a bright smile as she handed the saintly medicine over to him. This could be grown in the Black Tower, and then dug out when they had need of it. Now that the 6th floor of the Black Tower was open, the acceleration of growth of plants had not increased, yet it could stimulate all living organisms to grow even vigorously, and increase their medicinal effects. The Empress then gave Ling Han and Mao Shuyu each a wolf's tail, and then walked forwards, holding hands with Ling Han. The saintly medicine had been collected, and they had also obtained the wolves' tails, so they were naturally leaving. Mao Shuyu's expression was completely wooden as she took the wolf's tail.
She had not come back to her senses yet at all, and the same words streaked through her mind repeatedly. How could this be?
In any case, it is still early, so why don't we get some more saintly medicine? Ling Han's eyes shone. The Empress nodded. As long as it was Ling Han's suggestion, she would definitely not object. Mao Shuyu followed behind them, looking like a dead fish.
They swept through the area, collecting a total of 6 saintly medicines, and only now did Mao Shuyu, who had barely returned to her senses, advise them that it was time to return.
Otherwise, they would definitely be ranked outside the first 1,000. Ling Han was unsatisfied, but they should still be able to come here again in future, so there was no need to rush.
They returned, and though they encountered the sneak attacks of a few blind demonic beasts on their way, they were all easily dealt with by Mao Shuyu. A day later, they returned to the gathering area, and looking at the number that had already returned, they would probably be ranked in the 600s to 700s.
It was good enough to have passed. After another half-day's time, the first 1,000 people appeared, and the selection ended. Tu Kong brought the 1,000 people with him, and they arrived at an army camp at the foot of the mountains. This was the place where they would stay for the next 100 years. They had not even entered the camp when they could feel a powerful aura ripple out. It had surpassed the level of Genesis tier, as if it was the aura of a supreme ruler. Severing mundane tier. There was a vice-commander in the Dark Moon Army that had been temporarily transferred over to oversee them for 100 years. And in the Dark Moon Army, there were a total of 6 such vice-commanders who would take turns to act as the overseer. Otherwise, if they encountered some troublemakers, a consummate-level Genesis tier might not be able to deal with them. With a severing mundane tier overseer, it would be fine. What Genesis tier would dare provoke such an elite? Tu Kong was naturally not the only military instructor here, and there were a total of 10 of them. Usually, they would be taking turns to guide the candidates on how to cooperate and work together. Those who fought alone were called cultivators, and only those who could carry out coordinated movements would be termed soldiers. And now we will choose 10 captains from among you, and going by the results of the selection, the following 10 people step out. Number 170, number 534, number 895. Tu Kong began the next stage after asking for instructions from that severing mundane ancestor. The 10 people who had been pointed out stepped out, and unsurprisingly, Ding Xiaochen was also among them. When he walked out, he also bowed slightly to that severing mundane ancestor seated on the high platform, and the latter actually responded. He opened his eyes, and replied with a nod. When this grand elder opened his eyes, it was as if the universe had collapsed.
Everyone could see innumerable great stars fall down from the skies, a scene of utter destruction and annihilation, but after a shiver, they discovered that nothing strange had happened at all. This was the regulations that the severing mundane ancestor had cultivated, which were inclined towards destruction and bloodshed. The moment he opened his eyes, he could affect the masses, and for those whose wills were weaker, it was very possible that this effect would last throughout his whole life, and they would not be able to escape from under this influence forever. Cultivating Tao was naturally the Tao of heaven and earth, and if you were strapped in the Tao of another, how could you possibly be successful? That is Ding Hu, Lord Ding Hu, a First Severance Grand Elder, the Vice Commander of the White Tiger Army. Some people immediately whispered among themselves, and very soon, those who had initially been unaware of the identity of that severing mundane ancestor all found out. There was a great commander in the Dark Moon Army, and that was Mao Dai, a Third Severance Grand Elder. Underneath the great commander, there were 3 commanders, who led 3 different armies, and they were the Azure Dragon Army, White Tiger Army, and the Vermilion Bird Army, respectively. Why were there 3 armies, and not 2, or 4, or 5? That was because there were 3 great forces in Dark Moon City. The Duan clan controlled the Azure Dragon Army, the Ding clan controlled the White Tiger Army, and the Long clan controlled the Vermilion Bird Army. From a certain aspect, the great commander Mao Dai was merely a figurehead with no actual military authority. Subordinate to the commander would be the vice commanders, and there were a total of 6, 2 for each respective army. Everyone shook their heads. With Ding Hu present, that Ding Xiaochen would be able to gain the position of captain at the very least. However, with Ding Xiaochen's strength, it was actually not a difficult feat for him to accomplish. Thus, though everyone was slightly displeased, they did not have too much resistance against the idea, either. The rules are as follows. The present 10 are defending champions, and will accept the challenges of others. If they win, they will have successfully defended their positions, and if they lose, the defending champion will become another person. The time limit is 3 days, and at the end of the 3 days, the 10 remaining defending champions will become captains. Additionally, every battle has to be decided in an hour's time. If the victor is still undecided, it will be judged as the defending champion's victory. After every battle ends, the victor has the right to request an hour's time of rest. If he does not receive a challenge in the next hour, then the defending champion will be judged as directly winning. Then let's begin. Tu Kang's style was filled with the succinct ways of a soldier, not sluggish at all. Ding Xiaochen and the others all walked into the training grounds in the center of the army camp. The celestial realm was incredibly sturdy in the first place, and added with the fact that there was a severing mundane tier overseer, there naturally was no need to worry that the fierce battles would destroy the entire army camp. However, because there was still the limit of 1 hour, if there was still no challenger, the defending champion would become an assured captain, so when the hour's time was almost up, they gradually issued challenges to the 10 defending champions. As expected, luck was a big factor for entering into the top 10 during the selection. Some of them had kept their skills hidden, concealing their strength for a final explosive burst at this moment. And after a round of battles, 6 of the 10 defending champions had changed, more than half of them replaced. Ling Han looked at an elder and said to the Empress, "This guy's strength is not too bad, and it looks like his bloodline is different from others." That elder's whole body would be covered with ink-black scales when he was in battle. This was completely a thick layer of armor, which had a very strong defensive ability, so he did not have to fear the attacks of his opponent, and faced him head-on. His opponent had thus been defeated in 10 moves through this kind of method. There is that person too. The Empress looked towards a woman. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.